Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became Katsuki's Second Chance? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The warehouse smelled like SEC and PSS and booze. The sour, bitter scent of distressed Omega permeated everything, thick enough that Katsuki had to cover his nose with a hand. It made the alpha in him stir, made those protective instincts he tried so hard to keep at bay roar to life. Kirishima's hand landed on his shoulder, and Katsuki tensed. A second later, the beta's soothing scent flooded him, and Katsuki felt his shoulders relax as the Omega's soured scent was drowned out. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" Kirishima murmured. "Bad," Katsuki muttered. To a beta like Kirishima, the scent of a distressed Omega was mildly unpleasant, but to an alpha like Katsuki, it was horrific enough to drive him mad. It made him want to protect, to comfort, to threaten anything that came near the creature his instincts roared at him to keep safe. He wanted to kill something. And it was for that exact reason that Katsuki was being kept out of the action with Kirishima as his babysitter, no less despite every cell in his body rearing for a fight. Because if he got his hands on the men who had hurt the Omegas in this building, he might just kill them. Kirishima's hand tightened where it rested on his shoulder. "Come a minute. Don't focus on it. Let's just think about the mission." Katsuki grunted, turning his head toward the room where the smell was the thickest. He wrinkled his nose. As much as his instincts were screaming at him to step inside to safe, to comfort, to protect, his rational brain fought against the notion. He didn't know what he'd find in there. He didn't think he wanted to learn. But he was a pro, and this was his job. With an unsteady breath, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scent was even thicker in here, and Katsuki practically choked on it. The room was dark, shrouded in shadows. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust, but once they did, the blood drained from Katsuki's face. A figure was lying in the corner, motionless and so small that Katsuki thought, for a sickening moment, that she was a child. But no, the scent permeating the air didn't smell like milk and honey. Whoever this Omega was, she was fully grown. Long, dark hair pooled around her head, and her revealing silk clothes were stained with blood and other things that Katsuki didn't want to consider. "Hey bro, calm down," Kirishima hissed. It was only then that Katsuki realized he was growling. Katsuki dropped to his knees at the Omega's side, hands fluttering uselessly around her prone form. He needed to do something, needed to check for injuries and perform first aid, but he couldn't bring himself to touch the wounded Omega. What if he wound up hurting her worse? Katsuki forced himself to take a deep breath. Through his mouth, of course, too much of the Omega's distress scent, and Katsuki might just lose what was left of his sanity. Once his racing heart had calmed, he reached out, slow and careful, and flipped the Omega onto her back. The first thing Katsuki realized was that the Omega was emaciated, worryingly so. It took a second more for Katsuki to realize that the Omega was male, a rarity among rarities, accounting for less than 1% of the population. Given how uncommon his secondary gender was, it was no wonder he'd wound up in a place like this. The scent of blood hit him next. The Omega was wounded. Katsuki snarled when he saw the manacle around the Omega's throat that had rubbed his skin raw, the scars from mating bites littering his neck and chest. There were even teeth marks on his stomach and inner thighs that his skimpy clothes did little to hide. A growl rumbled low in Katsuki's chest. To bite someone like that was ntimi, a privilege reserved for a mate, and to mark an Omega so thoughtlessly was unforgivable. The Omega stirred, groaning as his wounds were jostled, and Katsuki pulled back. He didn't know how the Omega would react to an unfamiliar alpha touching him. He flooded the room with soothing pheromones. "Hey, it's okay," Katsuki ground out. "You're safe now." The Omega's eyes fluttered open. Green eyes met red ones, and for a moment, the world stopped spinning. Suddenly, the memories flooded him, so fast and intense that they left him reeling. Kaken! Tiny fists balling up in the fabric of his t-shirt. Wide green eyes and a cherub smile. "Wait for me, Kaken." Soft giggles and a high, sweet voice that always set Katsuki's explosive temper at ease. Then the memories shifted to other things. Darker things. Why are you being so mean, Kakin? You're just a quirkless Deku. Of course you're a stupid Omega, you can't do anything right. Green eyes brimming with tears. Katsuki's instincts roared to life. Suddenly, it was all Katsuki could do not to pounce on this Omega to hold him, seize him, claim him, protect him from the world that had hurt him so badly. His hands curled, longing to clutch the Omega tight and cradle him to his chest. He wanted to bury his nose in the Omega's hair, wanted to clean the blood from his skin and make sure he was warm and happy and safe. It wasn't Deku. Of course it wasn't. This Omega had brown hair, not green, and there were no freckles on his heart-shaped face. Just because he was a male Omega with green eyes didn't mean he was Katsuki's Omega. Not that Katsuki had ever done anything to show that he deserved Izuku. Not that Izuku had ever been his to begin with. Besides, Izuku was dead. He had been dead for years now, and it was all Katsuki's fault. Still, the alpha in him didn't care that this wasn't his Deku. It saw those green eyes, caught the scent of lavender and fresh cotton, and he was gone. Katsuki whirled when another scent spread through the room, clouding out the lavender smell he'd latched onto. His Omega's scent was sour, which meant something was distressing him, and it was Katsuki's job to keep his Omega safe. His lips pulled back from his teeth when he saw Kirishima, crouched down several feet away, and he growled. Kirishima's eyes widened. Bakugu! Katsuki snarled louder. Behind him, the Omega whimpered, curling in on himself. His scent soured further, until Katsuki could no longer detect the finer hints of lavender and fresh cotton. Kirishima raised his hands slowly, placatingly, releasing more of his calm, unthreatening scent. Calm down, Bakugo, you're scaring him. Katsuki paused. He wasn't scaring the Omega, his Omega was he? He was just trying to protect him. Kirishima kept talking. I get it, man. This is really effed up, I know it is. I know you want to protect him, but he's safe now, yeah? But Kirishima's clean, fresh scent flooded the room, and the curdled milk stench of distressed Omega faded along with the smell of lavender, to Katsuki's dismay. I'm not gonna hurt him, all right? Kirishima soothed. Not as long as you're here to protect him. But we need to get him out of here so that he can get medical attention. Medical attention. With sudden clarity, Katsuki remembered who he was and why he was here. This wasn't his Omega, wasn't his Deku. This was a victim of trafficking, someone who had been exposed to more than his share of possessive, aggressive alphas in his life, and there was little doubt that Katsuki's loss of composure wasn't helping. Katsuki turned again, almost flinching at the sight of tear-filled green eyes. Not Deku. He wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. On one hand, Katsuki would do anything, give anything, to see Deku again. But on the other, if he had to see Deku lying starved, bitten, and half dead on the floor, Katsuki knew it would destroy him. Katsuki deflated. He realized too late that he'd been flooding the room with an aggressive scent, and now the Omega was cowering, tears pooling in those remarkable green eyes. Katsuki resisted the urge to swear. Katsuki ran a shaking hand down his face. Sheet, I'm sorry for scaring you. I'm here to help. I promise. He took a deep breath, letting soothing pheromones leak from him. It took effort to calm down enough to emit them, but as they mingled with Kirishima's scent in the air, the Omega seemed to calm. His trembling didn't cease, but it slowed. The Omega looked up at Katsuki, and their eyes locked. For a moment, all they could do was look at one another. And in the middle of that hell, trapped as they were in that stinking, blood-soaked room, the Omega smiled. You came for me, he said. The Omega's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the ground. The traffickers were captured, the Omegas were safe, and the mission was complete. Still, Katsuki couldn't shake the exhaustion that had settled deep in his bones. He watched the red and blue flashing lights as the police and ambulances drove the perps to jail and the victims to the hospital. He tried to pretend he wasn't craning his neck to catch a glimpse of the green-haired Omega, but the man had probably already been driven away. He'd carried the Omega out of the hellhole that had been his prison, cradling the tiny body to his chest, resisting the urge to bury his face in dark brown curls and breathe in the soothing scent of lavender and fresh cotton. Even soured, it was addictive. Katsuki wanted his own personal supply. He couldn't help being protective, at least, that's what he told himself. The Omega was just so small and hurt and helpless, asleep in Katsuki's arms. So he tucked the Omega in close and held him until the doctors took him away. Now Katsuki would never see him again. That was for the best, he told himself. After all, the green-eyed Omega made him volatile. He reminded Katsuki too much of the boy he had lost, the one whose smile still haunted his best dreams and worst nightmares. The boy Katsuki had as good as killed. Kirishima sidled up next to him, leaning back against the brick wall at their backs. "How are you holding up?" Katsuki snorted. "We just rescued a sheet ton of Omegas who have been through hell, and you're worried about me?" "Yeah, I am." Kirishima crossed his arms. "Bakugo, what happened in there?" "That wasn't like you." "It was the smell," Katsuki said. "Sheet like that FS with an alpha's head, you know that." Kirishima shook his head. "No, that wasn't it. I've never seen you react like that. Ever." "Leave it, shitty hair," Katsuki growled. Kirishima didn't budge. "No." "Kirishima." Sweat pooled in Katsuki's palms. It had been a long FING day, and if Katsuki wasn't careful, he was going to blow something up. Katsuki just couldn't stop thinking about him. He saw one Omega with green eyes, and suddenly he was lost to the world. It was dumb, and it was shitty, and it was weak but dim. If the feeling of that Omega in Katsuki's arms hadn't done something to him. Katsuki grit his teeth. When the words finally came, they burst out of him with the force of one of his explosions. "It was his shitty eyes, okay?" Kirishima blinked. "The Omega?" "Yes, the FING Omega," Katsuki snapped. His throat worked. "They reminded me of him." Kirishima's face softened. "You mean Izuku, don't you?" Kirishima was one of the few people who knew about Deku, one of the few people Katsuki had been able to tell about his best friend and first love and worst enemy. During their first year at UA, on the anniversary of Deku's death, Katsuki had broken down. He'd told Kirishima everything, what he'd done, what he'd said, and how it was his fault and his alone that the only boy he'd ever loved had tossed himself off the roof of the tallest building in the city. Katsuki scoffed, forcing the memories out of his head. Goddamn shitty beta was too perceptive for his own good. "Yes, I'm talking about FANG Deku. That must have been hard." "It's not him, shitty hair. Obviously." Katsuki rolled his eyes, refusing to meet Kirishima's sympathetic gaze. "I know." Kirishima shrugged. "But seeing someone who reminded you of him in such a horrific situation, it makes sense the way you reacted the way you did. You wanted to protect him." Katsuki huffed, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, well, I only ended up freaking him out." "Stop it, Bakugo," Kirishima chided. "You saved him." Kirishima studied Katsuki, eyes darting over his slumped posture and tired eyes. His face fell. "I'm sorry, Katsuki." "The F, are you sorry for?" Katsuki ground his teeth. "You didn't do anything." "I know." F-, Kirishima said, running a tired hand down his face. "It's just that painful memories were brought back, and in such an ugly way." Katsuki's throat bobbed. "It's not like I have the right to grieve him." "Stop it," Kirishima demanded. "What?" "You said stupid sheet. You were a kid, it happens." Kirishima's voice was so gentle, far gentler than Katsuki deserved. "But you cared about him. Of course you're allowed to grieve." And Kirishima's breath hitched. "It's okay to move on, too, Bakugo. It's been 9 years. It doesn't make you a bad person to find joy again." Katsuki's teeth snapped closed. "Shut up, shitty hair. I'm just saying. I know what you're effing saying, and I resent it," Katsuki growled. He could smell his aggressive alpha scent leaking into the air, but he couldn't bring himself to dial it back. "Do you really think I'm still hung up on the shitty nerd 'cause I feel what? Guilty? No, of course that's not what I. Do you know why I was such a D to him? Because I was effing in love with him." Katsuki laughed humorlessly, digging his nails into his palms so hard it broke the skin. He was my best friend, and for my whole life before we even presented, before everything I knew he was mine. Katsuki's jaw clenched. And then we got older, and suddenly people were wondering why I didn't like any of the girls in my class, and people, they thought Deku was a freak. Male Omegas just weren't heard of. And they saw how protective I was, and they put two and two together and… Kirishima rested a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. You don't have to talk about this, Bakugo. Not right now. No, I FNG do, Katsuki snapped. Because I was so lost in my own FING shame that I became the thing that I swore to protect him from. And now he's effing dead, and it's all my fault. Katsuki's voice cracked on the word, and he turned his face away, praying to whatever god was listening that Kirishima hadn't seen the glint of tears in his crimson eyes. Kirishima's face crumpled. Katsuki. And you know what's tearing me apart? The thing that hurts worst of all? Katsuki whirled on his friend, eyes blazing with crimson fire. The second I realized that Omega in there wasn't Deku, I was relieved. Isn't that effed up, shitty hair? I don't think so, Kirishima said. His face was so sad. Not if you have a good reason. Katsuki looked away. Why were you relieved, Bakugo? Kirishima prodded. Katsuki closed his eyes, letting out a slow, shaking breath. Because being dead is better than going through what that Omega went through. If Deku had been alive and suffering this whole time, his voice cracked. God, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. You don't want the boy you love to suffer, Kirishima said. That's not effed up, Bakugo. That's normal. Katsuki's face fell, anger draining away and leaving nothing but eternal, unending sadness in its place. I miss him, he whispered. Kirishima sighed. I know. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to move on. Deku was it for me, you know? He ran his hands through his hair, clutching at the white blonde strands with bloody fingers. No one else clicks the way we did. I know all that true mate stuff is probably pseudo-scientific bullshit, but if it's real, if I had a true mate it would have been him. Don't say that, Bakugo, Kirishima insisted, running a soothing hand up and down Katsuki's back. You lost the one you loved, but it doesn't mean your life is over. You could love again. Katsuki turned tortured eyes on his best friend, and when he spoke again he sounded broken. Don't you get it? I don't want to. Izuku's eyes blinked open slowly. He winced as the bright fluorescent lights dug needles into his skull. Where was he? His heart started racing, and he stirred, reaching a hand up to cover his face, but he paused when something tugged against his inner elbow. He choked on a sob. It came back to him in a rush, noise and pain and gentle hands on his body, bright crimson eyes staring down at him, the smell of burnt caramel and spice. Kaken. He started to sit up, but the motion made the pain in his side flare. He cried out, clutching at his stomach as his ribs throbbed. Hands grasped his shoulders, pressing him gently against the mattress. Shoo, you have to stay down. Izuku lashed out instinctively. Since he was taken, the reaction had been drilled into him. An instinctual response to being restrained, to being held down. Every time hands landed on his body, they wanted something from him, wanted to touch him, bite him, no matter what Izuku said or did. There was no way of escaping it. It's okay, you're okay, the voice said, but the hands tightened around his shoulders, and Izuku could only fight harder. Tears streamed down his face. God damn it, they were hurting him, they were going to hurt him, and Izuku couldn't stop it. He was weak, powerless, and all he could do was sob as he was pressed down against the bed. Above him, he heard the sound of swearing. Sheet, I'm losing him. Footsteps darted across the floor, and with them came the scent of burnt caramel and spice. Izuku froze. What is that? The unfamiliar voice demanded. The footsteps paused. What? The scent stopped coming closer, and Izuku whined. That scent, it's soothing him, said the voice. The clothes he was rescued in, the second voice said. They're dirty. The hands flexed on Izuku's shoulders. They're carrying the scent of the alpha who saved him. It probably makes him feel safe. Bring them here. Are you sure? There's a lot of blood on them. A frustrated grunt. Just get over here before he hurts himself worse. The smell of burnt caramel and spice drifted closer, and Izuku latched onto it. He'd know that scent anywhere. The milk and honey undertones of childhood had long since faded, but the spicy sweet scent remained. Kaken. A dirty piece of fabric was laid on Izuku's hospital bed. It was covered in dirt and blood and other things that Izuku didn't want to think about, but that scent, that tantalizing, beautiful scent, hung in the air around it. Izuku's hand darted out, snagging the silk and pulling it closer. He buried his face in the fabric, trying to ignore the other smells that muddled it, focusing on Kaken's lingering scent. "I'll protect you, Deku. You know I will. I won't let anyone hurt you, ya hear? Teeth, stupid Deku, no one is going to touch you." He felt his muscles relax. Kaken was here, Kaken had come for him, and maybe Izuku was finally safe. Katsuki's early morning workout was interrupted by his work phone ringing. He grunted as he picked it up, wiping off his dripping sweat with the bottom of his t-shirt. "What?" he barked into the receiver. An unfamiliar voice crackled through the phone's receiver. "Dynamite." Katsuki grunted. "That's my name, don't fucking wear it out." "This is Dr. Suzuki," the voice said. "I'm glad to get a hold of you. If you can, would you come to the hospital today?" Katsuki's hand tightened around the phone. "Why?" "We're having a situation with one of the Omegas you rescued yesterday." Dr. Suzuki cleared her throat. "All of them are obviously traumatized, but this one in particular has extensive injuries, and we can hardly get him to calm down." Katsuki's spine straightened. The male Omega, the green-eyed one who looked so much like Deku that it hurt. "Why the F do you need me?" Katsuki asked, voice gruff. Dr. Suzuki sighed. "The Omega only settles at your scent," she said. "It isn't too uncommon for a traumatized Omega to react positively to the scent of the Alpha who rescued them, but we've never seen a reaction this strong before. But the only thing we have carrying your scent is his old clothes, and it's fading quickly." Katsuki couldn't help the Alpha pride that rippled through him. "So you want me to what? Scent something for him?" "If you could, yes," Dr. Suzuki said. She sounded exhausted. "I'm sorry to ask this of you, but I'm afraid it can't be helped." "No, it's okay." Katsuki cleared his throat. "I want to help. Is there anything else I can do?" Dr. Suzuki hesitated. "So far, the Omega is nonverbal, and we can't get him to cooperate with medical personnel. We're worried that sedating him might put him into a coma, but he needs more than he's letting us give him," she said. "If you could just be in the room, it might soothe him enough to let us continue." Katsuki froze, Alpha instincts going wild at the thought of seeing the green-eyed Omega again. "You want me to see him?" "I'm sorry to ask this of you," Dr. Suzuki said. "I know it crosses some boundaries." "I'll do it," Katsuki interrupted. "What? Are you deaf?" "I said I'll effing do it." Katsuki scoffed. "He's been through some shit. If I can help him, I want to do it." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Wow, thank you, Mr. Bakugu. You have no idea how integral this will be to his recovery." Katsuki ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. "I'll be there in an hour." Before the doctor could thank him anymore, he promptly hung up the phone. Dr. Suzuki was a short, squat beta woman with flushed cheeks and a shiny black bob. She smiled at Katsuki from behind wireframe glasses as she walked him to the Omega's hospital room. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Bakugu," she said. Katsuki grunted. "It's whatever. It might not be important to you, but it'll mean the world to this Omega." Her soft grin widened. "Did you bring something scented that we can give to him, or would you like for us to provide you with something you can scent?" Katsuki's cheeks flushed. He hefted his bag higher on his shoulder, knuckles going white where he clutched the strap. "I brought something. I figured the scent would last longer if I wear it a lot." "You're right, it will last longer that way. Thank you again." Katsuki shrugged, refusing to meet Dr. Suzuki's eyes. "Whatever. I can just buy a new one." "I have to warn you, Mr. Bakugu, that this might not be easy," Dr. Suzuki said, running a tired hand through her black hair. "He's deeply traumatized, and we have no idea how he might react to seeing you. We think he'll respond positively, given his inclination towards your scent, but you're the first Alpha who's been allowed to see him so far." Katsuki blinked. Really? It's standard procedure in these sorts of situations. Alpha pheromones tend to set them on edge. Dr. Suzuki glanced over at him, pushing her glasses further up her nose. We do have a few ground rules, I'm afraid. Katsuki scowled, shoving his hands into his pockets. What sort of ground rules? Keeping your temper under control, for one. She eyed him warily. Loud noises startle him, so you have to be sure your voice isn't too loud. Ask for permission before touching him, and don't bring up any potentially triggering subjects. Can you do that? Katsuki scoffed. Yeah, I can fucking do that. I'm not an idiot. Dr. Suzuki turned her head away, but Katsuki thought he saw her crack a smile. She came to a stop before a nondescript white door at the end of the hall. All right, this is it, she said with a sigh. Are there any questions you have before we head inside? Katsuki shifted nervously from foot to foot. What do I call him? He asked. Her face fell. About that, we haven't been able to identify him just yet. Like I said, he's nonverbal trauma-based selective mutism, most likely, and his fingerprints. She winced. Well, they were burned off. Katsuki's heart thudded painfully in his chest. They were what? Dr. Suzuki continued like he hadn't said anything. We're trying to make a match using his dental records, but his canine teeth have been filed down probably so he couldn't bite his captors. One of his back molars is also missing. He probably took a bad hit at some point that knocked it out. A low, threatening growl rumbled from Katsuki's chest. Dr. Suzuki's voice softened when she saw the horror on Katsuki's face. Things like this are common in Omega trafficking rings. They're not treated kindly, and in case they're ever recovered, their captors want them to be hard to identify. Katsuki let out a long, shaky breath. I just don't understand. Why would anybody? The world isn't a kind place, Mr. Bakugu. Especially not to Omegas. She placed a hand on the doorknob. Now then, are you ready to see him? Izuku was lying on his side with his back to the door. He couldn't stop trembling. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back there, lying hurt and bleeding in the dark. He kept his face buried in the old, dirty silk, focusing on Kaken's scent, but the smell was quickly fading, and once it was gone, Izuku's last tether to the real world would die with it. He was in the hospital, he knew that now. The hands that touched him were doctors, not crazed alphas, and the needle in his skin was giving him fluids, not drags used to keep him limp and sedate. But still, he couldn't help his reaction whenever they tried to touch him. The memories came back, and suddenly Izuku was feral. The door creaked open behind him, and Izuku stiffened. Excuse me, sir, called the doctor's now familiar voice. He still didn't know her name. There's someone here to see you. Izuku stiffened. He didn't want visitors, not doctors, not anybody. He just wanted to be left alone to die in peace. But then the tantalizing scent of burnt caramel and spice hit his nose, and everything else melted away. Kaken was here. Kaken was here, and he was going to take Izuku away from this place with the scary doctors and bright lights. He was going to protect Izuku the way he'd always promised. Maybe he'd yell. Maybe he'd scream. Maybe he'd call Izuku useless, and the way he always used to. But Izuku had faced so much worse since he was taken that all of Kaken's old insults seemed harmless now. When push came to shove, Kaken was a protector, and even in his worst moments, he'd never hurt Izuku even though he so easily could've. Kaken was sugoi amazing. Kaken was his hero. And Kaken had saved him. Izuku turned slowly, painstakingly, broken ribs aching as he turned to face his best friend turned tormentor turned savior. Kaken had always been beautiful. Ever since they were kids, Izuku had been in awe of him, his white blonde hair, sharp cheekbones and cut jawline, furious red eyes that were so warm whenever they landed on Izuku. But if Kaken had been beautiful at 14, he was magnificent at 23. He was tall, he'd grown so much since they were young that he would have towered over Izuku now, had they been standing side to side. His white t-shirt clung to the dips and curves of his muscled torso, and his sweats were slung low on his hips, highlighting his narrow waist and the V that disappeared beneath his pants. His intensity had only matured with age now. When Izuku looked into his crimson eyes, he was pinned in place, but somehow, he'd never felt safer. Hey, Kaken said, shoving his hands awkwardly into his pockets. His voice was low and rumbling, so much deeper than Izuku remembered, but perfect. Kaken stepped closer, filling the room with his soothing scent and dropping into the chair by Izuku's bedside. He cleared his throat, leaning forward to brace his hands on his knees. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Katsuki Bakugo. I'm an alpha and a pro hero. At his words, all the relief Izuku felt faded away, cold horror taking its place. His stomach curled into a knot. Because Kaken didn't remember him. The second the words left Katsuki's lips, the Omega's eyes green widened and flooded with tears. He drew back, clutching that disgusting piece of silk closer to his chest. Katsuki resisted the urge to swear. I mean, I'm an alpha, but I'm not that kind of alpha. He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. I'm not going to hurt you or anything. Dr. Suzuki placed a gentle hand on Katsuki's shoulder. Mr. Bakugo is the one who saved you. From the way the Omega's eyes had flooded with warmth when he caught sight of him, Katsuki figured he knew that already he recognized the alpha's scent, at the very least. Katsuki didn't know what exactly had set the Omega off, but he was determined to make the green-eyed male feel safe. I brought you something, Katsuki said, wincing at the way he stumbled over his own words. He didn't know why this stupid Omega made him so effing nervous. He reached into his bag, pulling out the UA sweatshirt that had been one of his favorites since high school. The Omega's eyes widened at the sight of it, and he looked so much like Deku in that moment that Katsuki wanted to cry. Katsuki held out the sweatshirt. You can take it. If you want. The Omega's gaze darted back and forth between the sweatshirt and Katsuki's face. After a moment's hesitation, his hand darted out, snagging the sweatshirt from Katsuki and cradling it against his chest. He buried his nose in the soft, worn fabric, and maybe it was Katsuki's imagination, but the Omega seemed to relax. Katsuki spied the dirty, blood-stained piece of silk that the Omega had been clutching before Katsuki gave him the sweatshirt. His heart stuttered when he saw it was the filthy, blood-stained silk lingerie that Katsuki had found him in. Hey, Katsuki said gently. Can I take that from you? It's all dirty. The Omega looked down at the scrap of silk, then up at Katsuki. Slowly he nodded. Katsuki reached out, movements slow and liquid so as not to startle the Omega, and grabbed the piece of fabric. The Omega's distressed scent was strong on the silk, permeating every fiber, along with the muddled sense of plenty of alphas that Katsuki couldn't pick out. It took physical effort to keep his snarl inside. He hated the idea that anyone else had touched this Omega, the Omega that his alpha instincts couldn't help but think of as his. He hated that anyone had hurt someone so small, so innocent. He wanted to rip the Omega's captors to pieces. Once again, gratitude surged through Katsuki. Deku was dead, but at least he hadn't suffered. The Omega only clutched Katsuki's sweatshirt closer to his chest. Katsuki essayed in a long, deep breath. He couldn't get agitated, not now, or it would set the Omega off. My friend here, Dr. Suzuki, has some examinations she needs to do to be sure you're healthy. Is that okay? The Omega stiffened. His eyes flickered up to Dr. Suzuki, and he drew back, tears welling in his green eyes. His lavender and fresh cotton scent soured. Hey, it's okay, Katsuki soothed, releasing calming pheromones into the air. You're safe, I promise. The Omega met his gaze again, burying his face deeper in Katsuki's sweatshirt. Katsuki's throat bobbed. He didn't know how to do this, didn't know how to deal with an Omega so traumatized he couldn't even speak. It's going to be okay, I promise, he said. I'll be here the whole time, and they won't hurt you. I won't let them hurt you. A bit of a growl entered his voice on the last word, but to his surprise, the Omega didn't seem intimidated. The sour bite of his scent faded, and he held Katsuki's gaze with glassy, unblinking eyes. Katsuki scooted his chair closer. He didn't want to blow past any boundaries, but, "Can I touch you?" he murmured softly. After a long, fraught moment, the Omega nodded. Katsuki slipped his hand into the Omega's, squeezing lightly. The smaller man's hands were dainty and covered with scars, and he clutched onto Katsuki like a lifeline. His hand fit into Katsuki's like it was meant to be there, like it had been there 1,000 times before. Katsuki pushed out more soothing pheromones. I really want to keep you safe, but I can't do that if you get an infection. Is it okay if Dr. Suzuki checks on some of your wounds? The Omega's eyes flickered up to Dr. Suzuki's again, but Katsuki squeezed his hand, drawing his attention back to Katsuki. Hey, it's all right. I'm going to be here the entire time. The Omega studied Katsuki's face. Squeezing Katsuki's hand tighter than before, he nodded. Katsuki held the Omega's hand through the whole examination. It couldn't have taken more than a half hour, but it felt like an eternity to Katsuki. Every second revealed new horrors. The bite marks on the Omega's neck, chest and thighs, some old, some new, were more inflamed in the light of the hospital fluorescence. He was covered in bruises, the most extensive of which were in the shape of handprints on his thighs. He was little more than skin and bones. Katsuki couldn't help but wonder when the last time he'd eaten was. The skin of his neck and wrists was raw where the manacles had chafed, and Dr. Suzuki informed him that the Omega had 3 broken ribs. Still, it was clear to anyone with a brain that the worst of the Omega's injuries were mental. He flinched whenever Dr. Suzuki touched him, squeezing his eyes shut and clutching onto Katsuki's hand with as much feeble strength as his starved body possessed. Through it all, he was eerily, heartbreakingly silent. After taking his temperature and rewrapping his wounds, Dr. Suzuki backed out of the room, leaving Katsuki alone with the Omega. The Omega released Katsuki's hand, reaching up to dig the heels of his hands into his eyes. He was trembling, lip shaking, and Katsuki knew he was moments away from shattering. So Katsuki did the only thing he knew how to do. He talked. I wonder if you could write out your name for me. The Omega looked up, peeling his hands away from his eyes long enough to meet Katsuki's gaze. Katsuki furrowed his brow. I'm just curious, I guess. I want to know what to call you. For a long, P.R.D.T. moment, the Omega was silent, staring at Katsuki with green eyes that saw far too much. When he spoke, it was with a voice rough and hoarse from disuse, yet with a melodic quality to it that made Katsuki's heart pound. What do you want to call me? He whispered. Katsuki practically jumped out of his skin. What? The Omega's shoulders curled in on themselves, and he fell silent. Katsuki could only blink at the Omega, trying to rationalize the turn their previously one-sided conversation had taken. I thought you couldn't speak. I can't, the Omega said, picking at the beds of his shredded nails. His voice was so quiet that Katsuki had to lean forward in order to hear it. Not to them, at least. My throat just closes up. Katsuki's breath hitched. And me? The Omega looked up at him through his lashes. You're different. Why? The Omega wrapped his arms around himself, clutching Katsuki's sweatshirt to his chest. His voice was so hoarse, so painfully quiet. Katsuki didn't even know what to say. It was like all the breath had been snatched from his lungs, and now he was gasping, staring at this starved, tiny Omega who had brought him to his knees in 2 words. Oh, Katsuki said. The tiny word wasn't enough to capture everything the Omega's words made him feel. You can call me whatever you like, the Omega whispered. I've been called so many things that I almost don't remember my real name. The words were laced with so much pain that it made Katsuki's chest ache. So now that you have the choice, what do you want to be called? Katsuki asked. The Omega studied him, eyes darting frantically over Katsuki's face. You really don't. Don't what? Never mind. The Omega looked down at his hands. You can call me Nanashir. Katsuki's brow furrowed. Nanashir, it was a word meaning no name, anonymous. Had the Omega really lost his sense of self so entirely? Okay, Nanashir, Katsuki said gruffly. You can call me Katsuki. The Omega's brow wrinkled. Wouldn't you prefer it if I called you Bakugu? No. Nanashir looked up, wringing his hands nervously in the worn fabric of the scented sweatshirt Katsuki had given to him. His voice was little more than a whisper. Why are you being so kind to me? Katsuki pet his head. Should I be cruel? No, you're just different, Nanashir muttered. Then what? Katsuki asked. A sardonic smile pulled at the corners of Nanashi's lips, like he was laughing at a joke that wasn't funny. Then what I expected, I guess. Katsuki studied the Omega. Are you a fan of heroes? Nanisher nodded, but he didn't look at Katsuki. He kept his nose pressed into the UA sweatshirt he was clutching to his chest. Katsuki let out a sigh, leaning back in his chair. It was no wonder that Nanisher was intimidated by him if he'd seen Katsuki's public persona. Frankly, if he'd seen anything of Katsuki at all. He was a real BSD most of the time, on screen and off it, but he couldn't treat this nameless Omega the same way he treated everyone else in his life. He couldn't treat him the way he treated Deku, not since his best friend had thrown himself off the roof after a thoughtless word from Katsuki. You have nothing to fear from me, Nanisher. You know that, don't you? Nanashi's eyes met Katsuki's, warm green clashing against harsh red. When Nanisher spoke, his voice was stronger than before. No, Katsuki, Nanisher said. I think there's plenty to fear. Nanisher fell asleep not long after Dr. Suzuki warned Katsuki that the pain meds might make him drowsy, and Katsuki slipped from the room as quietly as possible. He cast a final glance over his shoulder before closing the door. The Omega was curled on his side with his knees to his chest, holding Katsuki's sweatshirt like a lifeline. His long brown curls were tangled, falling over his pillow in a messy cascade, and the setting sun made his full lips and long lashes glow golden. He was still too pale, too bruised. How long had it been since he'd seen the sunlight? But at least now he was safe. Katsuki's alpha instincts purred at the sight of the Omega sleeping peacefully, even as they screamed at the idea of leaving Nanisher behind. Dr. Suzuki was standing outside, waiting for Katsuki. She looked up when he stepped out. How's he doing? She whispered. He's okay. Katsuki cast a glance at the closed door. He spoke to me. Dr. Suzuki straightened. He what? He said he couldn't speak to everyone else, but I was different. Katsuki shrugged, running a tired hand through his hair. He wouldn't give me a name, but he told me to call him Nanisher. Dr. Suzuki bit her lip. Patients with selective mutism are frequently only capable of speaking to people they feel comfortable with. It seems that that's you, Mr. Bakugu, she said. Katsuki wasn't sure whether to be proud or intimidated. What does that mean for me? For whatever reason, he's latched on to you, Dr. Suzuki said. Her dark eyes bored into Katsuki. You've already saved him once, but I think you might be the only person who can save him from the darkness in his mind. Katsuki looked again at the closed door. The Omega beyond was so small, so scared, so broken. And yet, there was a strength to him, deep in his remarkable green eyes. After all he had been through, Nanisher was still alive. Still fighting. He reminded Katsuki more of Deku every day. A second chance at it all. At protecting the green-eyed Omega who needed him. And Katsuki knew he could never replace Izuku, but maybe, just maybe, he could shake off some of the guilt that had been weighing on his shoulders for the last 9 years. Nanisher was restitution. Absolution. Redemption. Katsuki met Dr. Suzuki's eyes. When can I see him again? Katsuki was awoken in the middle of the night to the sound of his phone ringing. He sat bolt upright, scrambling for his phone on the bedside table and clicking answer before he'd even raised it to his ear. Akugu. It was Dr. Suzuki's voice. Yeah, it's me, what's happening? Katsuki barked. Nanisher is having an incident. You need to get to the hospital right away. Izuku dreamt of blood and pain and fear. So pretty, aren't you? Hands on his face, his body. Come on, don't be like that. Spread those pretty little legs for me. Teeth sinking into the sensitive skin of his throat. So fing delicious. I could just eat you up. Different faces, different voices, different names, but the story was always the same. They showed up, they found their pleasure, and they left him, broken and bleeding, on the ground. Izuku was screaming, and there were hands on his body holding him down. Nashi! Nanisher! Izuku lurched awake, clawing at the hands that held him. He was breathing too fast, his heart thundering too loudly in his chest. It's okay, soothed a familiar voice. Rough, yet calm. Steady. Like the last burning embers of a crackling fire. It's okay, Nanisher. You're safe now. Izuku pried his eyes open. They were damp, and he realized that he'd been crying in his sleep. Kaken was staring down at him, red eyes pinched in concern. It was his hands wrapped around Izuku's wrists, holding him down so that Izuku wouldn't hurt himself, he realized. "It's okay," Kaken said again, gaze darting over Izuku's face. "You're okay, Nanisher." Izuku choked on a sob. "Keika." "I'm here," Kaken said. "They're going to hurt me again." "No, they're not." Kaken carded his fingers through Izuku's tangled hair, so gently it made Izuku's chest ache. "I won't let them." Izuku reached out, balling his fists in Kaken's shirt and pulling him closer. "Don't go," he begged. Please, stay with me." Kaken's face softened. "I'm not going anywhere." Izuku pulled Kaken closer, burying his face in the alpha's chest. "Promise." Kaken's voice rumbled through him as he brought one hand up to brush long, soothing strokes down Izuku's back. "I promise." Dr. Suzuki looked like she had aged 10 years in just one day. She sighed, running a tired hand through her hair. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Bakugo. I'm sorry to disturb you." "Don't say that shit," Katsuki grumbled, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's not a problem." "Still, we can't rely on you to be here all the time," Dr. Suzuki said. "We need to look into getting a caretaker for Nanisher." A low, rumbling growl emanated from Katsuki's chest. "What? I'm not fucking good enough to help him?" Dr. Suzuki sighed. "Mr. Bakugo, Nanashi's path to recovery isn't going to be easy. He's going to need near-constant live-in care." For a moment, Katsuki was silent. Could he really take care of someone as traumatized as Nanisher? But maybe that wasn't the right question. Could he really bear to leave him behind? Katsuki cleared his throat. "I can do that." Dr. Suzuki blinked, stunned. "What?" "I haven't taken a vacation day in, 5 years. I can use what I've got saved up." He shrugged. "I'll have to go back to work eventually, but even then, my schedule is pretty flexible as long as I maintain my quota." His eyes flickered to the door, beyond which Nanisher rested. "I can take care of him." Dr. Suzuki's face hardened. "May I be perfectly candid, Mr. Bakugo?" Katsuki scoffed. "I wouldn't want you to be anything but. I don't know what your intentions are regarding Nanisher, but if you're looking for a mate, you should go somewhere else." Her voice was firm, harder than Katsuki had ever heard it. "This isn't some shrinking violet that you can woo and F-dash. This is a mentally scarred, deeply traumatized Omega who might never recover to what he was before." Katsuki's lips pulled back from his teeth. "That's what you think? That I'm looking for a fuck toy? Mr. Bakugo, you think I'm like all those shitty alphas who did that to him?" Aggressive pheromones started leaking out of him, flooding the hallway. "I'm not trying to imply anything, Mr. Bakugo, I just need you to know the facts," Dr. Suzuki said. "We don't know for sure, but his scarring patterns indicate that Nanisher was under the control of his captors for multiple years." She shook her head. "He's not going to be quick to get over that." Katsuki's mouth went dry. Years. Years." A low, rumbling growl emanated from Katsuki's chest. "I'm a hero. I was given training on how to deal with PTSD. Hell, I've had PTSD. I'm a certified first responder and I'm licensed to work at Omegan trauma shelters. Who are you going to find that's a better option than me, eh?" Dr. Suzuki crossed her arms over her chest. "I don't mean to offend you, Mr. Bakugo, but you don't have a reputation of being a particularly caring person. I've seen you with Nanisher, and I think you're good for him, but I do need to know why you're doing all of this for someone you've never even met before." Katsuki huffed, turning his face away. "Do I need a reason?" "Frankly, yes." She pet her head to the side. "You're offering to house, feed, and care for an intensely traumatized Omega for no personal benefit. You already saved him from that hellhole. This goes beyond being a good Samaritan. Why?" Katsuki whirled around, running agitated hands through his white blonde hair. F-dash. "Because he reminds me of someone, okay? Someone after lost." For a moment, Dr. Suzuki was silent. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Bakugo," she said at last. "But Nanisher isn't your lost loved one. You know that, don't you?" Katsuki growled. F-dash, "Yes, of course I know that. I'm not trying to replace the shitty nerd. Then what are you trying to do? Look, it's my fault he's dead, okay? Katsuki gritted his teeth, turning his face away from the beta. But if I can help Nanisher, maybe I'll deserve forgiveness. Redemption. Dr. Suzuki studied him. So all of this is because of a misplaced sense of guilt? Do you have a problem with that? Katsuki snarled. No. Your baggage is your own. Dr. Suzuki shrugged. As long as I believe you're going to do right by my patient, I see no problem in letting him stay with you. She took a step closer, and Katsuki didn't think he'd ever been so intimidated by somebody who barely came up to his collarbone. But I'm warning you, Mr. Deku, that I'm going to keep a very close eye on Nanisher. If I see one hint that something's wrong, not only will I have him out of your house, I'll have your hero license stripped before you have the chance to say dynamite. Are we understood? Katsuki held her gaze. Understood. Dr. Suzuki settled into the chair by Izuku's bedside. Nanisher, is it okay if I call you Nanisher? Izuku shrank back, clutching Kaken's sweatshirt to his chest, but when the beta woman made no move to approach, he found himself nodding slowly. He didn't know why he'd given Kaken a fake name. If he'd just told Kaken who he was, maybe everything would be fixed. Maybe Kaken would have taken him away from here, brought him home. Maybe Izuku would have been able to see his mom again after so many years. Maybe Izuku would have finally been able to start on the long road towards healing. But something had stilled his tongue when he went to speak his name. Kaken was treating him so kindly, so gently, and as weak as it made him. Izuku didn't want that to go away. Maybe it was better to be Nanisher, at least then. He wouldn't be weak, quirkless Deku. Even more than that, though, was the shame. How could he face Kaken knowing everything that had happened since Izuku was taken? What would Kaken think of him? Kaken had hated him from the time they were children. How would he react now that he knew Izuku was dirty, soiled? Worse, how would Izuku be able to face his mother? Yes, it was better for everybody that Kaken thought he was dead. Dr. Suzuki cleared her throat. Nanisher, it seems that being around Mr. Bakugo has been good for you so far. He informed me that you're even able to speak to him. Izuku nodded slowly. The beta woman bit her lip. Mr. Bakugo has offered to let you stay with him during your recovery. He says he'll be sure you're safe and eating and taking your meds. He'll take care of you. The floor dropped out from underneath Izuku. Kaken was going to come for him? Save him? Take him away from this bad place with the bright lights and so many people? Twin hope and despair welled up inside Izuku, and it was all he could do to keep his tears inside. Safe as long as Kaken was around, Izuku was safe. Nanisher, I want you to know that you have a choice, Dr. Suzuki said gently. Mr. Bakugo's offer is generous, but if you'd prefer to stay somewhere else, you have plenty of options. There are care centers especially for Omegas who have been through traumatizing situations, and if you'd feel more comfortable there, we can look into finding you someplace nice to stay during your recovery. Izuku shook his head vehemently back and forth. He wouldn't go there, couldn't go there. They couldn't keep him safe. His captors would come after him again, he knew they would, and Izuku would rather die than go back to the hell that had been his life. He couldn't picture falling asleep anymore without the scent of burnt caramel and spice to comfort him. At the sight of the tears welling in Izuku's eyes, Dr. Suzuki held her hands up placatingly. Calm down, Nanisher. We're not going to do anything you don't want to do. Izuku forced himself to take a deep breath. He hated how weak he'd become, how helpless. Once upon a time, he'd wanted to be a hero who saved people, but now he was the one who needed saving. Since when had his emotions been on a hairline trigger, so that the smallest thing could set him off? Since when had Izuku stopped being able to take care of himself? Am I correct in assuming that you'd rather stay with Mr. Bakugo? Dr. Suzuki asked gently. Izuku nodded again, burying his nose in Kaken's sweatshirt. Dr. Suzuki's smile was tight. Then I'll start filling out the paperwork. Katsuki scowled as he glared up at the sign of the nesting shop. He was an alpha and a pro-hero. He told himself he'd dealt with plenty of things scarier than a room full of hormonal omegas. He could do this. He'd just gotten the call earlier today. Nanisher had agreed to stay with Katsuki for the duration of his recovery, with frequent check-ins from Dr. Suzuki, and it was Katsuki's job to be sure the Omega was safe and comfortable. He'd be picking Nashi up from the hospital in 3 days' time, and the first order of business was making sure the Omega had a space to call his own in Katsuki's luxury condo. Only one problem. Katsuki had no idea how the F to do that. "This is so exciting, Bakugo," Mina squealed. She was practically hanging off his arm. "I can't believe you're finally bringing an Omega home." "Shut it, raccoon eyes," Katsuki snapped. "He's not my mate or anything." Mina pouted. Come on. You're taking care of him. Isn't that what alphas do for their Omegas?" Katsuki's alpha purred at the thought, but he shoved away the possessive instinct. "No, that's what heroes do for people who need them." "Right." Mina dragged out the word, rolling her amber eyes heavenward. "And you're at a nesting shop with me because—" Katsuki huffed. "Because I want him to feel comfortable living with me, and I need some sheet. You're a shitty Omega, so I figured you'd know what he'd like." Mina pet a hip, settling her hands on her waist. "You do realize that this is something alphas typically do for their mates? What else am I supposed to do, let him sleep on the ground?" Katsuki demanded. Mina giggled, snagging his arm and tugging him towards the door. "Come on, let's go inside already." Katsuki growled but followed her lead. The inside of the shop looked like a unicorn on a sugar high had been in charge of interior design. The walls were covered in pink fleur-de-lis, the carpet was thick and plush, and the name of the store had been printed on the far wall in silver glitter. The shelves were stacked with plushies, sweaters, blankets, pillows, everything under the sun that could possibly be construed as cuddly. The air was sickeningly sweet with the scent of the dozens of Omegas who passed through every day. "God FNG damn it," Katsuki muttered under his breath. "What is all this sheet?" Mina clicked her tongue. "The fact that you don't know this is exactly why you need me." Katsuki scowled. "Just tell me what to FNG by already." "Okay, first things first, blankets," Mina said, heading over to a shelf full of them. "He's going to need a lot of blankets. What sort of color scheme are you going for?" "There. I swear to God, Katsuki, but you'd be helpless without me," Mina said. She rolled her eyes again, running her hands along a nearby stack of blankets. "You need to pick out a few colors to base the room around, something to tie it together." Katsuki's brow furrowed. "White," he blurted. He thought Nanashir might appreciate something light. God knew he'd been trapped in the dark for too long. Katsuki's mouth went dry. "White and green." "White and green, easy enough." Mina cracked her knuckles. Katsuki let Mina have free roam of the store, trailing behind her as she picked out bedding, pillows, a couple of cuddly sweatshirts, and way more blankets than any one person could possibly need. "How much is this going to cost?" Katsuki grouched. "Gosh, you want him to feel welcome, don't you?" Katsuki scowled but fell silent. It was as they were making their way to the checkout counter that Katsuki saw it. A dark green blanket that was the exact same color as Nanashi's eyes, Izuku's eyes. He reached out before he even knew what he was doing, almost miming at the feeling of the criminally soft fabric. With hardly a glance at Katsuki's face, Mina pulled the green blanket from the shelf and dropped it into her cart. "You should scent that one for him," she said almost absently. "Bring it to him when you go to pick him up at the hospital. A gift from his alpha will make him feel safe." "I'm not his alpha," Katsuki reminded her. Mina speared him with a knowing glance and walked away. Katsuki couldn't remember the last time he'd been this nervous about, well, anything. He didn't know how to do this or what the protocol was. This was the first time Nanashir would be allowed outside the hospital since being rescued, and Katsuki was terrified of FING this up. He'd brought the green blanket with him scented, just like Mina had suggested. He didn't know why the Omega would want his shitty scent, anyway. People told him it was bitter like burnt sugar. But it seemed to soothe Nanashir, and Katsuki was desperate for his first day with the traumatized Omega to go as smoothly as possible. He made his way to Nanashi's room, anticipation mounting with every step. Dr. Suzuki looked him up and down. "Good," she said. "You're here." Katsuki cleared his throat. "I brought clothes for him. In case he needs them." "Perfect, I'll bring them in." "Are they in there?" She took the bag from Katsuki. There's some more paperwork for you to sign before he can go with you, but hopefully you'll be out of here within the hour. Katsuki opened his mouth to protest. He was itching to see the Omega, but Dr. Suzuki walked away with his bag in tow before he could say a word. Kaken was outside his hospital room, and Izuku felt like he was losing his mind. He didn't know what to do, what to say. He didn't know why Kaken was doing any of this. Why go out of his way to help an abused Omega he'd never met before? Why offer to house him, feed him? What was his endgame? It wasn't like the Kaken Izuku knew, the one who only cared about being a pro, the one who would crush whatever and whoever got in his way. As much as Izuku admired Kaken, the alpha wasn't selfless. Did he expect another form of compensation? Izuku told himself that Kaken wouldn't do that, even though he wasn't entirely sure it was true. The door cracked open, and Izuku stiffened, then relaxed just as quickly when Dr. Suzuki's voice filtered through the crack. "Nanashire? I'm coming inside, okay?" Izuku nodded, even though the beta woman couldn't see it, and the next moment, Dr. Suzuki stepped inside. She smiled at him. "Mr. Bakugo is just filling out the paperwork now, but he brought some things for you." Izuku's eyes widened. Kaken had brought him something? With every new piece of information Izuku learned about Kaken, he seemed less and less like the aggressive alpha Izuku had grown up with. Dr. Suzuki set a black duffel bag on the end of the bed. "Let me know if you need anything." She slipped out of the room, and the door clicked shut behind her. Izuku crawled across the hospital bed, crouching hesitantly in front of the duffel bag. He unzipped it with trembling hands. As soon as the zipper came undone, Kaken's scent filtered out of the open bag, immediately setting Izuku's mind at ease. He reached inside timidly, freezing as his hand brushed against something soft. He peered into the bag. It was filled with brand new clothes with the tags still on, a bit too large for Izuku, but obviously purchased with him in mind. Criminally soft sweatpants, a burgundy V-neck t-shirt, comfy black sneakers. Izuku's cheeks burned when he saw that Kaken had even included a pair of boxer briefs. Izuku traded his hospital gown for the new clothes, savoring how soft they felt against his skin. Suddenly, ridiculously, he felt the urge to cry. It had been so long since anyone had taken care of him that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Gratitude warred with terror in Izuku's chest. Kaken was being so generous, and yet, now that the poisoned thoughts had entered his head, he couldn't banish them. What did Kaken really want with him? Izuku didn't know how long ago he was taken, but he knew it had to have been at least several years. And in all that time, no one had treated him as anything more than a toy. A doll. A Deku. Izuku drew a shuddering breath into his lungs, trying to ease his trembling. Kaken wouldn't hurt him, he told himself. Kaken was different now. And if Kaken did try to touch him, well, Izuku could handle it. He'd been through worse, hadn't he? And at least it seemed like Kaken would treat him kindly the rest of the time. All Izuku could do was try to please Kaken to the best of his ability so that the alpha's fury wouldn't turn on him. Katsuki had finished filling out the paperwork by the time Nanashire was fully cleared and stepped out of his hospital room. He was still too pale, too thin, but he looked better out of the hospital gown. Even so, the new clothes hung off his skeletal frame. Katsuki had bought them a size too big with the intention that the Omega would grow into them as he gained weight, but seeing how underweight Nanashire sent a pang through Katsuki's chest. Nanashire stopped several feet away. For the first time, Katsuki realized just how tiny the Omega really was. He barely came up to Katsuki's collarbone. He looked nervous, shifting in place from foot to foot, and he refused to meet Katsuki's eye. "Hey," Katsuki said softly. "Are you ready?" Nanashire nodded, but flinched when a door slammed down the hall. He was obviously overwhelmed. Katsuki chewed on his lower lip. If he was trained for this, but he still didn't know what the F to do. Gently, Katsuki took the duffel bag from Nanashi's shoulder and dug through it until he found what he was looking for. His cheeks flushed. He felt incredibly stupid doing this, but he had no clue what else could calm the Omega. Katsuki ducked so that he was at Nanashi's eye level. "Can I touch you?" he murmured. Nanashire looked up. His green eyes were glazed and glassy, but he nodded. Katsuki swung the blanket around Nanashi's shoulders, tying it into a knot under the Omega's chin. As soon as Katsuki's scent drowned out the smell of blood and antiseptic, the Omega's pupils dilated, and he seemed to relax. When he met Katsuki's gaze, his eyes had cleared. Mina was right about the blanket, at least. Are you ready to go? Katsuki asked. Nanashir nodded again. They walked side by side out of the hospital, and Katsuki felt new hope ballooning in his chest. He would do right by Nanashir, the way he hadn't been able to do for Deku. He swore it on the shitty nerd's grave. This is it, Katsuki said, pushing his condo door open and flicking the lights on. You can come on in, there are slippers by the door for you. Nanashir took a step inside, eyes wide and lips parted in awe as he stared at the luxury condo, and Katsuki felt a wave of alpha pride ripple through him. His space wasn't shabby by any means. The hardwood floors were dark and smooth, the white and black furniture was plush and clean. The open concept and high ceilings made the whole space feel large, and the walls were hung with modern art. The far wall was made up entirely of windows. Come on, Katsuki said. Your room's this way. Nanashir trailed down the hall after him, keeping his head down and his shoulders hunched. When Katsuki opened Nanashi's bedroom door, the Omega said in a breath. I wasn't sure exactly what you needed, Katsuki said. He felt blood rising in his cheeks. If there's anything else I can get you, just tell me. Nanashir stepped cautiously inside, staring up at the guest room that had been converted into his bedroom. The walls he'd kept white. Katsuki hadn't known how the Omega would want to decorate, but the bed was made up with a plush white coverlet with plenty of throw pillows, and a cuddly green armchair was tucked into the corner. It was plain, but nice clean. And judging from the way Nanashir stared at it all, it was more than enough. Once again, alpha pride surged in Katsuki's chest, but he tamped it back down. This wasn't some elaborate mating ritual, this was just Katsuki taking care of an Omega in need. Katsuki cleared his throat. My room's next door, and the bathroom is at the end of the hall. There are towels in there if you want to take a shower or something. At Nanashi's nod, Katsuki stepped back from the doorway. All right, then I'll go get dinner started. Nanashir emerged 20 minutes later, damp hair dripping onto the neckline of his burgundy t-shirt. His arms were crossed over his chest, and he wouldn't look Katsuki in the eye. Katsuki looked up where he was sitting on the couch. Dinner is almost ready, it just needs to cook for a few minutes. Nanashir nodded. He sidled closer, toying nervously with the loose fabric of his t-shirt. There were shadows in his eyes today, and Katsuki realized he hadn't spoken since Katsuki picked him up from the hospital. Katsuki's brow furrowed. Is everything okay? Without a word, Nanashir perched on his lap, straddling Katsuki's waist with his thighs. He leaned forward, brushing his lips against Katsuki's in a timid, feather-light kiss that sent Katsuki's heart racing before pulling back. Katsuki's brain was scrambled. He blinked up at the green-eyed Omega, and the only thing he could think to say was, "What?" Nanashir leaned in again. He was less hesitant this time, more sure of himself as he pressed his mouth against Katsuki's. Katsuki's heart thundered, and all he could think about was Deku. All he could see was green. The alpha within him stirred, and he couldn't bring himself to pull away. This was Deku on his lap, Deku's lips caressing his own, Deku's hands balled so carefully in the thin fabric of his t-shirt. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to cry. He wanted to push Nanashir away. He wanted to pull Deku closer. It was only when Nanashi's fingers slipped underneath the hem of Katsuki's shirt that he remembered himself. This wasn't Deku, this was Nanashir, the traumatized Omega he had taken in with the promise of keeping him safe. Whatever this was, whatever Nanashir was doing, Katsuki needed to put a stop to it now. Stop. Katsuki caught Nanashi's wrists, forcing the Omega's hands away from his body. He was breathing hard. Please, stop it. Nanashir bit his lip. This close, Katsuki could see how full the Omega's mouth was, how his canines dug into his plush lower lip. I'm sorry. Did I go too fast? We can start again. Something rose up in the back of Katsuki's throat. He felt dirty. He felt wrong. When he spoke, his voice was firm, solid. I'm going to be upfront with you. I don't really know what's going on, but I'm going to have to ask you not to touch me like that. Ever. Nanashi's face was carefully blank, but there was sorrow in his eyes. This is what you want, isn't it? His voice was hardly more than a whisper. "This is why you agreed to take me in." Katsuki reeled back. "What the F dash? Why would you think that?" He couldn't quite temper his volume, and Nanashir flinched but didn't pull away. "That's all alphas seem to think I'm good for." Nanashi's hands fisted in the fabric of Katsuki's t-shirt. "And you're amazing, Dynamite, but what? But you're just like the rest of them, aren't you?" Nanashi's emerald eyes were glassy with tears, and he wouldn't meet Katsuki's gaze. "All you see is what I can do for you." Katsuki flinched. He wasn't like that, he wanted to say. He was different. But something about Nanashi's words rang true. Katsuki didn't take in the Omega out of the goodness of his heart. He certainly wasn't looking for SEC, but to him, Nanashir offered a chance at redemption. If Deku was still alive, or if Katsuki had never loved Deku at all, would he even have spared Nanashir a second glance? "I don't want to have EC with you, Nanashir." Katsuki pushed the Omega off his lap and stood, balling his hands into fists at his sides. In moments like this, the shame swarmed him, so thick that Katsuki could hardly breathe. "I'm going to go check on dinner." Nanashir called out from behind him when Katsuki was halfway to the kitchen. "What do you want from me, Katsuki?" Katsuki turned, catching the green-eyed Omega's gaze. "I have a lot of regrets in my life, Nanashir," he said. "I just didn't want you to be another one." Dinner was strained awkward. Katsuki sat across the table from Nanashir, but he couldn't quite bring himself to meet the Omega's eyes. Nanashir was on a strict meal program that would replenish his body as soon as possible while reducing the risk of refeeding syndrome, meaning Katsuki had prepared a bland broth that the Omega would be able to stomach. Katsuki hardly tasted it. He wanted to say anything to comfort Nanashir, but the words died before he could speak them. Katsuki cleared his throat. "I'll be staying here for a while," he said. "I've taken a leave of absence from work, so you don't have to worry about being alone or anything. I'm a pro hero, you're safe here." Nanashir dragged his spoon across the bottom of his bowl, but he didn't seem to be eating anything. "Okay. Is the broth all right?" Katsuki asked. Nanashir tugged his lower lip between his teeth. "It's good." "You're not eating." "I'm not hungry." Katsuki studied the Omega. He was still so small, so frail, starved. Prominent collarbones jutted from his chest, and if he hadn't been swimming in the clothes Katsuki had given him, Katsuki had little doubt that he would have been able to see Nanashi's ribs. "You need to eat to get your strength up." Nanashir turned his face away. "It's just what?" Nanashi's cheeks flushed. "You're looking at me." "Oh, sorry." Katsuki looked down, scraping his spoon across the bottom of his bowl. "No, it's okay," Nanashir said, but Katsuki could hear the tension in his voice. They lapsed back into silence, Katsuki keeping his eyes turned firmly away from the nervous Omega. He drummed his fingers against the table. "Will you tell me something?" Nanashir blurted. Katsuki blinked. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Just about you." Nanashir started shredding his napkin into pieces under the table. "You know, something to help me get to know you a little better." "Oh, sure." Katsuki cleared his throat. I'm a pro hero, but you already knew that. I went to UA high school." Nanashi's head snapped up. "You did?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Nothing, that's cool." The Omega's cheeks were bright pink. "Do you want me to tell you about it?" Katsuki prodded. Nanashi's flush deepened, but he said nothing. "All right." Katsuki shifted in his chair, thinking about his high school days. He wasn't sure what would interest the Omega. "Truthfully, life at UA wasn't easy," he said. "We got into a lot of shit pretty early on, being attacked by villains and stuff." "No. I mean, did you hear?" Katsuki cleared his throat. "I mean the USJ. Do you know about what went down?" "No," Nanashir said. "I haven't heard of anything like that." "Oh." Katsuki swallowed. The USJ incident had been all over the internet in its day, and afterwards, Katsuki's class had become media darlings. If Nanashir hadn't even heard of it, he must have been taken before the attack. Katsuki did the math in his head, and his throat went dry. 8 years. Nanashir had been missing for 8 years. Maybe more. He forced himself to keep talking, despite the horror of his revelation. Oh, well, a bunch of villains attacked us. A few times, actually. I got kidnapped once. Katsuki said it offhand, but as soon as the words left his mouth, Nanashi's eyes went wide. Wait, what? Katsuki cursed himself internally. He should have known better than to bring up kidnapping in front of a trafficking victim so soon after the Omega was rescued. Yeah, Katsuki said. A couple friends came to rescue me, but it definitely effed me up. For a long time. He shrugged, not quite able to meet Nanashi's eyes. But I healed and I moved on, and now I'm just trying to keep other people from going through the same sheet. You must have had good friends if they came to rescue you, Nanasher said. His voice had dropped to a whisper. You're lucky that they cared that much. Katsuki's mouth was dry. Yeah, he murmured. I guess I am. Nanashi's gaze was trained on his hands, which sat folded in his lap. I think I'm going to go to bed. If that's all right with you. What? Katsuki's voice was just a hair too loud, but even the tiny difference was enough to make Nanasher flinch. He forced his tone to gentle. Katsuki wasn't used to dealing with people who were so flighty. I mean, you're free to do what you want, but you've hardly touched your food. Oh. Nanashi's brow furrowed. Right. I can make you something else, if you like. No, it's not that, Nanasher said, shaking his head. I guess I'm just tired. Oh. Okay. Katsuki's eyes darted nervously over the Omega's sunken face. Will you eat more tomorrow, though? You're pretty underweight. Sure. I'll try. All right then. Nanasher stood. He was still somewhat unsteady on his feet, but he managed to make his way to the hall without issue. By the time he opened his bedroom door without toppling over, Katsuki forced himself to relax. The Omega cast one final glance over his shoulder, eyes so green and solemn. Now more than ever, they reminded Katsuki of Deku's eyes. Good night, Katsuki, Nanasher murmured, before he shut the door behind him. As soon as Nanasher was out of hearing range, Katsuki thunked his head against the table. I am such a FNG idiot. Izuku didn't know what was wrong with him. He braced his hands on the vanity and stared into the mirror, eyes darting frantically over his unfamiliar reflection. He knew vaguely what he looked like. Of course he'd seen himself in passing every once in a while over the years, but staring into his own eyes made it so much more real. It was no wonder Kaken didn't recognize him. His hair was so long, now long and brown. The extra weight from the added length made his natural curls less springy, and years of malnutrition made it lank and frizzy. Izuku was paler, now too, and his freckles had practically faded from view after so much time spent indoors. His once round cheeks were now sunken, and his throat was covered with scars from dozens of mating bites he had received over his time in captivity. If his reflection hadn't followed his movements, he wouldn't have recognized himself. He'd left Kaken sitting at the kitchen table after it had all become too much. He was safe now, everything should have been better. But even with Kaken watching over him from the next room, even with clean clothes and a room of his own, everything felt wrong, like it was all just an elaborate fantasy that would evaporate at a moment's notice. His feelings were a twisted amalgamation of everything he hadn't let himself feel for who knows how long, and he didn't know what to do with them. He was sad. He was scared. He was angry. Izuku pulled back the soft sheets of his new bed and crawled beneath them, pulling the covers up over his head. The bed was warm and safe, and Izuku wanted to cry. It had been so long since Izuku had a bed to himself, so why did he feel so afraid? Nanasher was acting strangely. Maybe it was to be expected, but to Katsuki, the change was jarring. In the hospital, Nanasher couldn't calm down without Katsuki's scent. Now, the Omega tried to avoid Katsuki at all costs. It had been 2 days since Katsuki had brought him home, and things were only growing more strained. Katsuki didn't know what to do. He tried calling Dr. Suzuki, but she wasn't much help. After what he's been through, it's going to take him a while to adjust. All you can do is be patient with him, and once he's comfortable, he'll start on therapy to help him unpack his trauma. Which left Katsuki back at square one. Hey, Nanasher? The Omega stopped in his tracks, but said nothing. You know you can talk to me, right? Nanasher wouldn't meet his eyes. About what? I don't know about your feelings and sheet. Katsuki shifted uncomfortably. This was really not his strong suit. That's what I'm here for. To help you. When Nanashir spoke, he was quiet, his voice hardly more than a whisper, and Katsuki had to strain to hear him. I don't know what I feel anymore. We can figure it out if you want, but bottling this sheet up inside isn't good for you. Katsuki's throat worked. I would know. Nanashi's eyes darted over Katsuki's face. He looked almost afraid, and the expression turned something in Katsuki's stomach. Would you at least sit down? Katsuki grumbled, and if there was a note of desperation in his tone, it was not because he was worried. Definitely not. I haven't seen you much. I just want to be sure you're all right. Nanashir sat hesitantly, perching on the edge of the couch like he was afraid to get too comfortable. He worried at his full lower lip. How long was I gone? The question hit Katsuki harder than a punch in the gut. I don't know exactly, he admitted. Then guess. Katsuki took a deep breath. Dr. Suzuki doesn't want me to tell you that. She said it might be bad for your progress. Stop it. Just stop. Nanashir shut his eyes, threading hands through his long, stringy hair. I can't live with the not knowing. It's tearing me apart inside. Katsuki's chest ached. Nanashir had lost so much of his life to the darkness, and Katsuki didn't know what to do. He didn't know if the knowledge would break Nanashir. He didn't know if he'd be able to pick up the pieces. But Nanashir had a right to know. 8 years, Katsuki murmured. Maybe more. Nanashi's breath hitched. His hand came up to cover his mouth, and it looked to Katsuki that he was trying desperately to keep a sob inside. Nanashir, please talk to me. I understand what you're going through. No, you don't, Nanashir snapped. Tears spilled onto his cheeks, and he wiped them away hastily. You don't understand anything, Katsuki. Katsuki's throat was so tight. You're right, he forced out. I don't understand. But I want to. You can't. You said you were kidnapped. But your friends came to rescue you. They cared enough to come after you. Nanashi's voice cracked. No one did that for me. I doubt they even realized I was gone. Nanashir. Nanashir laughed, but it was a strangled sound. If they saw me today, I don't think they'd even recognize me. They probably forgot I existed in the first place. Nanashir, I don't know who used to be in your life, Katsuki said. I can't speak for what they do or don't feel, what they did or didn't do. But that sheet doesn't matter now. Katsuki inched forward, releasing soothing pheromones into the air. You're here, and I'm here, and I just want to help you get better. You have people who care about you now, Nanashir. You're safe. Katsuki's voice deepened into a low growl. If you disappear on me, I'll get you back, no matter what. I'm going to protect you, Nanashir. Do you understand? Nanashi's eyes squeezed shut. You're lying. What? Nanashir stood abruptly. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Nanashir, stop. Before he could think, Katsuki's hand lashed out, snagging Nanashi's wrist. Don't go. Nanashir flinched away, and when he spoke, the ice in his tone could hardly contain the underlying panic. Let me. Katsuki let go so quickly he might have been burned. Just talk to me, Katsuki begged. Please, Nanashir, talk to me. You want me to talk to you? The noise that Nanashir made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I don't even know what I'm feeling. All of this feels like some beautiful dream, and soon I'm going to wake up, and I'll be right back where I started. I'm scared all the time, and I hate that you're the only thing that makes me feel safe. I hate that I feel so angry and I don't even know why. I hate that a part of me hates you. Tear-filled green eyes locked with Katsuki's red ones, and there was something so sad, so fragile in their depths that it broke Katsuki's heart. Out of everybody in the world, why did it have to be you? Katsuki couldn't even begin to understand what that meant, but at least Nanashir was talking. At least now, there was something that Katsuki could do. He took a deep breath. It's okay if you hate me, Nanashir. Nanashir's shoulders stiffened. What? I said, it's okay if you hate me. Katsuki shrugged. I get it. I don't. Nanashir turned away, blinking fast to banish the tears welling in his eyes. Listen. I don't want to make this all about me or anything, but my mom was kind of a shitty person. Katsuki cleared his throat. No, scratch that, she was really shitty. She beat me up a lot. Like to tell me I was useless, worthless. After I was kidnapped, she told me it was all my fault, and I believed her. Katsuki's voice dropped low. For years, I believed her. Katsuki couldn't bring himself to meet Nanashi's eyes. He still didn't like to talk about this. Even after all these years, memories of his mother brought up such ugly emotions, and trauma he had tried so hard to work through reared its ugly head. But Katsuki knew how this worked. He couldn't ask Nanashir to open up if he himself wouldn't let himself be vulnerable, and if Nanashir couldn't face his past, he would never be able to heal. I was so angry all the time, Katsuki continued. His throat felt dry. All I wanted was to scream and shout in rage. And I did. I was horrible to the people who were closest to me, people who didn't deserve it. Green eyes, so similar to Nanashi's, flashed through Katsuki's mind. And by the time I saw that all my fury was just a way of covering up my pain, it was too late. Tears were streaming down Nanashi's face. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been where you are. Katsuki was desperate, half begging for Nanashir to open up. Maybe not to the same extent, but I understand. I get what it feels like to be angry, to want to burn the world down so that everyone else will have to suffer the way you did. And I understand that you have to feel that rage in order to be able to heal. Katsuki's gaze dropped. I told you that I took my anger out on someone who didn't deserve it, but I do. I deserve it. So if you need someone to hate, hate me. If you need someone to resent, resent me. I can take it. I won't break. Nanashir sank back onto the couch. Maybe he just wanted to take a seat, but Katsuki had a sneaking suspicion that his knees had grown too weak to support his weight. The Omega wiped his tears with the back of his hand. How did you get through it? Katsuki breathed in deep. I was in a really dark place for a really long time. And then when I was 14, something happened. At the thought of green eyes, Katsuki's hands curled into fists. Changed me. And that was the beginning, I think. But ultimately, it wasn't until I started opening up that I was able to make progress. You think so? Yeah, I do. Katsuki looked down at his hands, picking idly at a hangnail until it started to bleed. I met my best friend at UA. His quirk is hardening, he can make his skin as hard as a rock, but his personality is a bit like that, too. No matter what you throw at him, he takes it with a smile. He understood that I was hurting, and when I needed the space to rage, he gave it to me. It's funny, it was only when I was finally given permission to feel that anger that it started to disappear. He looked up, forcing himself to meet Nanashi's emerald gaze. Nanashir, after everything you've been through, it makes sense that your emotions are going to be complicated. It makes sense that you're going to be feeling too many things all at once. But no matter what you're feeling, I'm going to be here. You're not going to scare me away. And maybe that was all it took, maybe that was all Nanashir needed. Because at his words, Nanashir broke. Nanashi's emaciated frame shook with the force of his sobs. It was like something inside him had shattered, whatever barrier was holding back his emotions had cracked, just slightly, just enough for all those poisonous, ugly feelings to find their release. Katsuki pulled the Omega into his arms, and Nanashir buried his head between Katsuki's neck and shoulder. He breathed in Katsuki's scent, breath hitching in time with his sobs, hands balling into fists in Katsuki's shirt. Katsuki moved his hand up and down Nanashi's back in long, soothing strokes. He murmured soft, soothing things in the Omega's ear as Nanashir cried into his chest. The dam had broken. 2 days of silence were finally over. Katsuki couldn't fix the mistakes of his past, but he could be here, now. And with Nanashir safe in his arms, he found that there was nowhere else he'd rather be. Katsuki was making oatmeal for breakfast 2 days later when Nanashir crept out of his room. The Omega was still timid. He walked around the apartment like Katsuki would abandon him if he took up too much space. But they'd made progress since their conversation. Nanashir wasn't avoiding Katsuki like the plague anymore, and he seemed more comfortable sticking close to the alpha when he needed comfort. And if Nanashir was still nervous around Katsuki, well, Rome wasn't built in a day. Nanashir sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Good morning, Katsuki, he murmured. Katsuki grunted. You hungry? I'm going to take that as an enthusiastic yes. He spooned the oatmeal into a bowl and set it on the table before Nanashir. He'd already put out honey, oat milk, and fresh fruit to top it with. Katsuki took pride in his abilities as a cook. More than that, he liked cooking. It was meditative after a hard day. Sometimes it was the only thing that calmed him down. And now that Nanashir was living with him, Katsuki found that something intrinsically alpha within him liked providing meals for his omega. He slid into the seat across the table from Nanashir with a bowl of oatmeal of his own. Nanashir had already doused his breakfast in milk and honey and was now picking at his food with solemn disinterest. Getting Nanashir to eat was harder than bathing a cat. Katsuki had expected that the omega would be ravenous after coming home, but as Dr. Suzuki had patiently explained after Katsuki called her in a panic, Nanashi's body was unused to being regularly fed. An imbalance of stomach acid and a confused metabolism sometimes made him feel nauseated after eating, and his capacity for large meals had diminished greatly. The foods Nanashir could eat were also limited, at least for the time being. When he'd first woken up in the hospital, they had only let him drink water. He worked his way through fruit juice and broth, and now he was on to soft and semi-solid foods. Even paired with the supplements he'd been given, Nanashi's body would take time to recover, but it didn't make it any easier to watch him turn down desperately needed nutrients. Katsuki leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You need to eat something. At least a few bites. Nanashir frowned. I know I do, but it upsets my tummy. If anyone but Nanashir had used the word tummy in full seriousness, Katsuki probably would have blown them up, but somehow when Nanashir did it, it was inexplicably endearing. You're feeling that way because you've gone without consistent meals for so long, Katsuki growled. It'll get better once you start building up your strength. Hesitantly, Nanashir raised the spoon to his mouth. Katsuki watched as the omega chewed and swallowed. Katsuki leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. So, I had a question. Nanashir looked up. Katsuki shifted uncomfortably. Sheet, why was he suddenly nervous? This wasn't like him. Obviously there's no pressure, but, you remember Kirishima, that friend I was talking about the other day? Nanashir nodded. He didn't look upset yet, that was good. Yeah, well, he was there. That day. Katsuki cleared his throat. When we found you. Nanashi's face blanched, and when he spoke again, his voice was. Oh. Anyways, I was talking to Dr. Suzuki, and she said it wouldn't be a bad idea to introduce people into your environment little by little, Katsuki said. He could feel his cheeks heating. Kirishima is an idiot, but, he's a good man and a good friend. With your permission, he could come over at some point later this week. Katsuki clutched the back of his neck with a hand. It would be totally on your terms, of course he'd only stay as long as you wanted, and you could leave at any time, but I thought I'd bring it up. I'm sure you get tired hanging around me all day. Kirishima is much more likable than I am. The corners of Nanashi's lips twisted into a tiny smile. I don't know about that, Katsuki. I like you just fine. Katsuki quirked a brow. I thought you hated me? I don't hate you. Nanashi's cheeks turned pink. I feel angry sometimes, but that has less to do with you and more to do with everything else. And what you said the other day helped. Katsuki's heart rate picked up. Yeah. It feels better that I'm not bottling it up. His eyes flicked up to meet Katsuki's. And you're not too bad, as long as you're not bullying me into drinking a gross prescription protein shake. He made a face. Katsuki barked a laugh. They're good for you. Nanashir wrinkled his nose. They're foul. Katsuki leaned back in his chair, letting an easy grin spread across his face. I'll tell you what, I won't make you drink a protein shake today, but you have to eat your oatmeal. All of it. Nanashir groaned. It's tasty, look. Katsuki shoveled a spoonful of oatmeal into his own mouth, making exaggerated noises of pleasure as he chewed and swallowed. Delicious. Nanashir rolled his eyes, but he nevertheless picked up his spoon and took a dainty bite of his breakfast. It was a small win, but a win nonetheless. So tell me about Kirishima, Nanashir said, taking another bite of his oatmeal. Katsuki sighed, leaning back in his chair. The guy's a goddamn golden retriever. Huge, dumb as rocks, and just about the sweetest person you'll ever meet. I swear to God, it is impossible to get that guy to dislike you, Katsuki grumbled. Trust me, I tried. Nanashir snorted. If he's a golden retriever, you must be some sort of Pomeranian or something. I'm a what? Katsuki demanded. Nanashir smiled to himself, taking another bite of oatmeal. A very, very angry Pomeranian. I'm nothing like a Pomeranian. Katsuki growled. I think it's the hair, Nanashir said, mimicking an explosion around his head with his hands. It's all poof. And big dogs are all softies, it's the small ones that have bad attitudes. Katsuki crossed his arms. I do not have a bad attitude. Nanashi's grin was mischievous. So what about me? He asked. What kind of dog would I be? Katsuki scoffed. You wouldn't be a dog. You're a teensy little bunny or some shit. A bunny? Yeah, you're all cute and little with the puffy hair and the button nose, Katsuki said, rolling his eyes. You're effing bunny. For the first time since Katsuki had known him, Nanashir giggled. Katsuki was staring. He knew he was, but he couldn't help it. Because Nanashi's voice was hoarse, and he sounded like he hadn't laughed in months or years, but his laugh still might have been one of the most beautiful sounds Katsuki had ever heard. What? Nanashir asked, smile fading as quickly as it had come. Nothing. Katsuki shook his head. Just remembered something I need to tell Mina. Nanashir nodded, peppering a few more fresh berries onto his oatmeal. Well, if Kirishima would like to come over, it's fine with me. I'd like to meet the guy who managed to tame the one and only Katsuki Bakugo, attack Pomeranian. Katsuki growled low, which sent Nanashir into another fit of giggles and DMN if the sight didn't melt something in Katsuki's chest. Kirishima showed up at Katsuki's doorstep on Saturday, armed with 3 overflowing bags and a self-satisfied grin. Katsuki opened the door, then sighed. What the shitty hair? Kirishima's smile widened. I come bearing gifts. I can see that, Katsuki deadpanned. The question is, why? It's polite. I need something nice to greet your new house guest. He shouldered past Katsuki effortlessly, stepping into the apartment. In the years since Kirishima had gotten even bigger. Now, he towered well over 6 foot, and his enormous frame was roped with muscle. His spiky hair had gotten longer and now fell past his shoulders, his teeth were sharp and pointed, and his face was crisscrossed with old scars. He looked like a beast. Still, appearances could be deceiving. Anyone who had met Kirishima even once knew that he was a gentle giant. Where's Nanashir? In his room, Katsuki said. I told him I'd come get him once you're settled down enough not to freak him out. Kirishima looked genuinely heartbroken. You think I would freak him out? Katsuki rolled his eyes. Sit. Kirishima plopped obediently onto the couch, practically vibrating with excitement. Behave, Katsuki warned, leveling a finger in Kirishima's face. If you freak him out, I'll have you out of here before you can say, Crimson Riot. Keep loud noises and sudden movements to a minimum. Got it? Kirishima saluted. Yes, sir. Then I'll go get him. Katsuki walked down the hall, stopping in front of Nanashi's bedroom. He rapped his knuckles against the door. Nanashir? You ready? The door opened halfway as soon as he knocked, like Nanashir had been waiting on the other side, but the Omega didn't step out into the hall room. His eyes darted around nervously. It's all right, Katsuki said, forcing his voice to gentle. Nothing bad is going to happen. I've got you, okay? Nanashir caught Katsuki's gaze and held it. Whatever he saw in Katsuki's eyes must have soothed him, because in the next second he stepped out of his bedroom, closing the door behind him. He clung to Katsuki as the Alpha led him into the main room. Kirishima grinned wide when he saw the Omega, baring his shark-like teeth at the smaller boy in a way that was unintentionally intimidating. Hey there. You must be Nanashir. You look a lot better than the last time I saw you. Nanashir shrunk back, hiding behind Katsuki's larger frame. My name is Ijiro Kirishima, also known as Sturdy Hero Red Riot. He smashed his fists together in his signature pose. It's nice to meet you, man. Nanashi's eyes darted back and forth between Katsuki and Kirishima. For a long, ardent moment, the room was taut and silent. Then Nanashir darted into the kitchen, and the door clicked. Shut behind him. You idiot! Katsuki hissed. You scared him off. I didn't mean to. In his defense, the redhead looked heartbroken, like somebody had kicked his favorite puppy. Katsuki sighed, scrubbing a hand down his face. Whatever, shitty hair, it's not your fault. We have no way of knowing what's going to set him off. Kirishima nodded, but his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. Damn it, he really was a giant softy. But before Kirishima could burst into big, manly tears, Nanashir slipped back into the room. This time, he was holding a pen and a pad of paper in his hands. He sank onto the ground in the middle of the room, sticking close to Katsuki like he trusted the alpha to keep him safe. Nanashir scrawled messily on the pad of paper, then held it up so Kirishima could see. It read Red Riot? Like Crimson Riot? Kirishima straightened to his full height, which was, admittedly, impressive, and grinned wider. Yeah man, are you a fan? Nanashir turned back to his notepad. When he flipped it around again, it said, I used to like heroes when I was a kid. I don't know much about them anymore, though. Heroes are so manly, Kirishima said, his crimson eyes going wide. Do you have a favorite? When Nanashir flipped the paper back around again, he was blushing. Like All Might. But then again, who doesn't? Katsuki's chest tightened. God damn it, but this conversation was reminding him too much of Deku. With the similarities already present, talk about heroes was just too much for him to handle, not that it wasn't expected. Kirishima was a pro, for crying out loud, and back when Nanashir was taken, All Might was still number one. He was everybody's favorite hero. It didn't mean anything. So why couldn't Katsuki get Deku out of his head? Kirishima, unfortunately, was too focused on Nanashir to pick up on Katsuki's nonverbal cues. That's awesome, man. Did Bakubro tell you all our All Might stories from UA? Nanashi's eyes went wide. When he scrawled on his notepad again, his handwriting was noticeably messy as he rushed to get the words out. You've met All Might? Kirishima laughed. Hell yeah, we did. He used to be our teacher. For all that Nanashir had implied he was a casual hero fan, the Omega looked like he was ready to pass out. What was he like? Nanashir scribbled. He was a shitty teacher, that's what, Katsuki growled. Kirishima's laugh was boisterous and booming. Stop it, Bakubro. You're only mad because he liked Togata better than you. Katsuki scowled. Shut up, shitty hair. I was Aizawa's favorite. I'm pretty sure Shinso was Aizawa's favorite, Kirishima pointed out. Yeah, but Shinso is his kid, so it doesn't count. Nanashir was scribbling something on his notepad. When he flipped it around, it read, Tell me about Yue. Katsuki rolled his eyes. In the short time Nanashir had been living here, he'd already expressed an insatiable interest about Katsuki's high school days. Maybe Kirishima would be able to tell him whatever the Omega was so desperate to know. It was a wild ride, I'll tell you that much. Kirishima laughed. His crimson eyes twinkled. We all almost died more than once, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I met my best friends in the world there, plus the love of my life. Nanashir grinned, but there was something wistful, almost sad about the expression. Katsuki realized he'd never know what Nanashir could have been if things had gone differently for him. If his passion for heroes was any indication, maybe he would have even wound up at UA, by Katsuki's side. Maybe things would have been different for both of them. Kirishima leaned back against the couch cushions. So Nanashir, tell me about yourself. Is there anything I should know about you? Either Kirishima was striving to give the Omega some sense of normalcy, or he was a well-intentioned idiot who didn't realize how loaded that question was. Katsuki barely resisted the urge to drop his head into his hands. Kirishima was better with people than Katsuki was, but what was Nanashir supposed to say after being held captive for 9 years? But to Katsuki's surprise, Nanashir perked up. There's not much to tell, he wrote, but other than heroes, I used to like drawing. I was pretty into manga too. Hey, I might have something for you, then. Our old classmates still work together, and when they heard that you were going to be living with Bakubro for a bit, they wanted to get you some housewarming gifts. They wished they could be here themselves, but they thought that might be too much at once. The gifts were, for the most part, charming. Standouts included noise-canceling headphones from Todoroki. The autistic hero had experience dealing with sensory overload and figured they might help with anxiety. From Uraraka, a fluffy pink sweatshirt with cotton ball on the hoodie strings. The Omega was clearly skeptical that Katsuki had managed to scrounge up adequate nesting supplies. A night light from Tokoyami. If I've learned one thing from Dark Shadow, it's that some demons are easier to handle in the light, and as promised, an entire shoujo manga set from Hagakure, to which Kirishima remarked that Nanashire could always borrow Bakugu's collection, only to be threatened with bodily injury moments later. It seemed that everybody from Class A had pitched in with something to make Nanashire feel more at home. Nanashire seemed most taken with the pro-hero Dynamite plushie Mina had gotten him. He giggled upon seeing its embroidered face. He scribbled out a quick message on his notepad, "They made you look so angry." Katsuki scowled, which only made Nanashire laugh harder, and although he never would have admitted it, Katsuki might have played up his reaction just a bit. It was worth it if it made Nanashire smile. The plushie sat in Nanashi's lap for the rest of the night. Nanashire retreated back into his room after an hour or so, citing a headache, although Katsuki wouldn't have been surprised to learn that the Omega was just getting overwhelmed. Whatever the reason, Katsuki couldn't help but feel pleased. Nanashire had done far better than anyone had been expecting. Katsuki stared at Nanashi's door for a long second after it closed behind him. It was only when he was sure the Omega was out of earshot that he turned to Kirishima, keeping his voice low. "If that didn't go as well as it did, you'd be dead right now, shitty hair." "What did I do?" Kirishima asked, pouting. "He was fine, wasn't he?" "Yeah, luckily," Katsuki snapped. "You shouldn't have asked personal questions like that. Who knows what's going to set him off?" Kirishima rolled his eyes. "Bakubro, I was asking for his interests, not his life story." "It was risky," Katsuki hissed. Kirishima sighed. "Nanashire knows what happened to him better than anyone," the beta reminded him gently. "You should avoid triggers, but don't be afraid to ask him questions. If you're too serious about avoiding his past, I've got to ask which of you you're really protecting." Katsuki's lips pulled back from his teeth. "The F is that supposed to mean?" Kirishima's eyes softened. "I think a part of you doesn't want to know what happened to him," he said. "It's not that I don't get it after what you've been through, of course you're gonna want to protect yourself. But if you treat him with kid gloves, you're gonna make him feel like he can't talk to you." Kirishima shrugged, running a hand through his spiky crimson hair. "Respect his boundaries, but you've got to give him room to open up, you know?" Katsuki turned his face away. He just wanted to protect Nanashire, or at least, he thought he did. But it had been almost a week since Katsuki had first brought him here, and in all that time, Katsuki had learned practically nothing about the Omega. Seeing him interact with Kirishima was the first time Katsuki had learned about why hadn't he asked? He was afraid of setting Nanashire off, that much was true. But asking personal questions just seemed like too much too fast. Every passing day, Nanashire reminded him of Deku more and more, and as the connection in his mind grew stronger and as he started to care about Nanashire as an individual, the thought of what had happened to him only grew more painful. The fact remained that if Katsuki had asked earlier, he might have gotten Nanashire a sketchbook. Maybe if Nanashire had an outlet, those ugly, painful emotions wouldn't have built up the way they had. Maybe everything would have been better. "Whatever, shitty hair," Katsuki grumbled, grudgingly admitting defeat. I love you too, Bakubro." Kirishima winked. "See ya later, okay? Text me if you need anything." Yeah. Katsuki rolled his eyes. "Get out of here." He shooed the exuberant beta out of the apartment before shutting the door behind him. Katsuki had some thinking to do. Izuku woke to thick, heavy darkness and a weight on his chest. Sweat soaked his nightclothes and tangled in his hair like blood. His breath came in frantic, choking gasps. His sheets tangled around his legs from the way he had thrashed in his sleep. It took him a moment to come back to himself to realize where he was, and that the stickiness coating his skin was sweat, and that his hands were free and unrestrained. The nightlight Kaken's classmate had given him Tokoyami, if he remembered correctly, glimmered faintly in the dark. Izuku let out a strangled sob. He hated this. Every second felt like he was balancing on a tightrope, like he was only waiting for the other shoe to drop. This temporary peace, this brief reprieve, would never last. He wanted so badly to believe that he was safe, but he knew better. He could never be free. His monsters would never leave him. He shoved aside the covers and stumbled to his feet. He was hot, too hot, and everything was so dark, and there was nothing at all to distract him from the torment in his mind. He needed a way. He needed out. Izuku stumbled through the bedroom door. He felt along the walls as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, tripping over his own feet in an effort to get away. His knees gave out when he reached the living room, and he dropped onto the couch. He turned on the TV and muted it, content to let the flickering light drive away the shadows. He tried to focus on the smiling faces of the actors on the television screen, but he couldn't stay present for more than a few moments at a time. His eyes kept blurring with tears. He hugged his knees to his chest and buried his face in his hands, letting out long, shuddering breaths. He tried to quiet his sobs. He couldn't wake Kaken. Despite how gently the Alpha had been treating him, Izuku still couldn't forget their past, and he was just waiting for the day that Kaken would hurt him again. Nanisher? Izuku whirled. Standing in the doorway was Katsuki, clothes rumpled and hair mused. Even now, the Alpha was beautiful. Sleep softened the angry lines of his face, and his shirt had ridden up enough that Izuku could see a band of tanned, taut stomach, but Izuku's shoulders tensed when he saw him standing there, watching Izuku with narrowed eyes. "What are you doing out here?" Katsuki asked, scrubbing a hand down his face. "It's the middle of the night." Izuku bit his lip. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "No, you don't have to be sorry," Katsuki said. His lips pulled down at the corners. "Is everything okay?" Izuku had to force himself to breathe. This was Kaken. Kaken wasn't going to hurt him. "It's fine. I'm fine." Izuku couldn't bring himself to meet Katsuki's gaze. His gaze remained trained on his lap. "You should go back to sleep." Kaken's eyes flickered over Izuku's face. "Can't sleep," he said. "Do you mind if I stay?" Izuku fidgeted, ifising his hands in the fabric of his thin t-shirt. "You don't have to worry about me. I'll be okay." "Who says I'm worried about you?" Katsuki said, leaning against the doorframe. "I got an injury a few years back, and it still acts up every once in a while. Makes it hard to sleep." Izuku's brows pulled together. "An injury?" "Yeah. Don't worry, it's not a big deal. My knee got busted up real bad and I had to get surgery, that's all." Katsuki shrugged. "What about you? What's your excuse for being up this late?" "It's nothing," Izuku said. "Bullshit. What's wrong?" Izuku's hands balled into fists in his lap. "Will you just leave it?" "No," Katsuki crossed his arms. "I can't help you if you don't talk to me." "I had a nightmare, that's all," Izuku said. His voice sounded small to his own ears. "I don't want to talk about it." Katsuki looked like he wanted to say more, but he stopped himself. He let out a long, slow breath. "Okay." With a long look at Izuku's face, Kaken disappeared into the kitchen. Izuku buried his face in his knees, forcing himself to breathe. As much as the explosive Alpha still frightened him, Izuku couldn't help but feel safer when he was around. He knew Kaken wouldn't let anyone else hurt him. But Kaken wasn't gone for long. He emerged minutes later with 2 steaming mugs in hand. He passed one to Izuku as he sat down on the couch next to him, closer than was strictly necessary, but Izuku couldn't bring himself to pull away. "What is this?" Izuku asked. "Hot chocolate," Katsuki grunted. "It's good for the soul." Izuku peeked up at Kaken from beneath lowered lashes, studying the Alpha shrewdly. "You don't seem like the kind of person who drinks hot chocolate." A crease appeared between Katsuki's brows. "The hell is that supposed to mean?" "I don't know," Izuku said. "You seem more like a one black coffee kind of guy." Katsuki rolled his eyes. "Just drink it." Izuku took the mug Kaken extended in his direction, blowing carefully on the hot, foamy surface. The warm ceramic in his hands was soothing, and he pulled it closer, letting the steam tickle his face. "You're shivering," Katsuki said. Not. R2. Whatever. It's fine, I'm fine, Izuku insisted. Goddamit, he didn't know what he wanted. He wanted to laugh, he wanted to cry. He wanted to run away, he never wanted to move. He wanted Kaken to stay, he wanted Kaken to leave him alone. You keep saying that, but I don't think I believe you. Katsuki stood again, pulling the throw blanket from the back of a nearby chair. He draped it around Izuku's shoulders, careful not to nudge the full mug of hot chocolate in his hands. Better? Katsuki asked, retaking his place at Izuku's side. Slowly, Izuku nodded. As much as he didn't want to admit it, he had been freezing. The sweat had dried on his body, and now the air of the apartment seemed a bit too cold. Katsuki let out a breath, leaning back against the sofa. Maybe it was the low light, but Izuku thought his cheeks looked a bit pink. I know you said you don't want to talk about it, and I'll respect that. But if you do need to talk, I'm here for you. Or whatever. I don't want you to think of me differently. Izuku's hands tightened around the mug. His voice sounded small to his own ears. I don't want you to look at me and see someone dirty. I already know what happened to you, Nanisher, Kaken said. You don't know all of it, Izuku whispered. I know enough. Katsuki turned to face him, bracing his arm against the back of the couch. Nanisher, what happened wasn't your fault. Nothing you can say is going to make me run away. His soothing scent drifted through the air, and as much as Izuku tried to fight it, he felt himself relax. I'm here, now and always, and no matter what shit happened in your past, that's not going to change. Tears blurred in Izuku's eyes. Katsuki, you don't have to tell me everything now, Katsuki said. His voice was low and soothing. You don't ever have to. As long as you're okay, I'm happy. But if you need someone to talk to, you can talk to me. I dreamed about you, Izuku blurted. For a moment, Katsuki was silent. What? I was back there. Izuku set his steaming mug down so that he could wrap his arms around himself, blinking fast to clear the tears from his eyes. I dream about that a lot. I guess it's not surprising. I spent so many years there that my brain doesn't know how to accept that I'm really safe. His voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes when I wake up, I don't know which is real, this or my dreams. Most nights, it's the same. Some faceless alpha touches me, and I just close my eyes and wait for it to be over. Izuku's breath itched. Sometimes it changes, though it'll be people I've met, or I'll be somewhere I've never seen before. One time I dreamt that someone was choking me, and when I woke up I was holding my breath. Tonight, though, it was you, Izuku said, swallowing his sob. When the door opened, you were standing there, and you walked over to the bed. In the darkness, Katsuki's face looked pale, bloodless, like the thought itself made him sick. I would never. Nanisher, I swear to you I will never, ever hurt you. He shook his head. I'll kill anyone who tries. I know. In my head, I know that, but the rest of me hasn't caught up yet, Izuku said, digging his fingers into the soft flesh of his arms. The tears welling in his eyes finally spilled over wet tracks down his cheeks. Katsuki, I feel so scared all the time. Every day, every hour, every second. I'm terrified. I'm scared that I'm going to wake up one day and find myself back there. A sob cracked through him, falling like tears from his lips. I'm scared that they'll find me again. I'm scared that my heat will come and you won't be able to hold yourself back. And I'm so sick of it. I'm so tired of feeling this way all the time. His voice was a broken plea, hardly louder than a whisper. I just want to be okay again. Katsuki's crimson eyes were wide, and when Izuku dared to meet his gaze, the look in them was one of pure heartbreak. He reached out like he meant to touch Izuku, but stopped halfway. His hands trembled in midair. Can I touch you? He asked. After a moment's hesitation, Izuku nodded. Katsuki's shoulders slumped with something like relief, and he reached out, arms wrapping around Izuku's body with the sort of gentleness Izuku never would have known he possessed. He cradled Izuku to his chest, pressing his cheek against Izuku's hair. He held the omega like he never wanted to let go. Nanisher. Katsuki's voice rumbled through him. I will never do anything to hurt you. Ever. I know, but... No, you don't. Katsuki's arms tightened around him. Nanasher, no matter what happens, you are safe with me. I swear it on my life. I don't care about your heat, only the worst sort of person claims they can't control themselves. I'm not an animal. A growl entered his voice. And if anybody ever tries to take you back, I will stop them. I will die before I let that happen. Are you listening to me? This close to Katsuki, all Izuku could smell was burnt caramel and spice. The scent wrapped around him, soothed him, held him close and comforted him. It was a territorial scent, but not a threatening one. It was strong, protective, and for the first time in a long time, Izuku felt safe. Izuku sobbed. He clung to Kaken like a lifeline, hands balling in the fabric of his t-shirt. Katsuki. Shoo. Katsuki's hand came up to slide Izuku's hair. It's okay, Nanasher. Katsuki, I don't know what to do, Izuku whimpered. I don't know how to fix it, fix me. You don't have to be fixed, Nanasher, Katsuki said, resting his chin atop Izuku's head. You're not broken. You're healing. Izuku sobbed. Am I ever going to be okay again? Yes. It might take months, it might take years, but I am going to be there the entire time. And someday I am going to see you smile, a real smile, one without any pain or fear. Katsuki's hands trailed soothing strokes down Izuku's back. Even then, you'll have hard days and bad dreams, but the light will be enough to outshine the darkness. Do you promise? I promise you, Nanasher. Izuku pulled away, swiping at his tears with the back of his hands. I'm sorry. It's late and I'm keeping you awake. Stop it. Katsuki's hands came up to cup Izuku's cheeks, forcing Izuku to meet his gaze. I'm here for you, Nanasher. I'll say it however many times you need to hear it. A broken sob cracked from Izuku's chest. He curled up closer to Katsuki, breathing in the calming scent of burnt caramel and spice. Tell me what I can do to make it better, Katsuki whispered. It sounded like a plea. Stay. Izuku's fists tightened in the fabric of Katsuki's shirt. To stay. Please. Katsuki pulled him closer, pressing his lips to Izuku's hair. Always, he whispered. Katsuki woke up with Nanashi's body in his arms and head on his chest. His instinct was to panic. Oh my god, he's sleeping on me. What if I do something wrong? What if I wake him up? What if I? But the Omega was sleeping soundly, soft little noises that weren't quite snores slipping between his parted rosebud lips. His chest rose and fell evenly, the little worry line between his brows had smoothed, and his thick green lashes were so long they pressed against his cheeks now that his eyes were closed. Katsuki never even thought to question why Nanashi's hair was brown if his lashes were green. And Katsuki couldn't help but marvel that he could have this, that something this pure, this soft, could exist in such an ugly world. That after all the mistakes Katsuki had made in his life, Nanasher could feel comfortable enough to fall asleep in his arms. It turned Katsuki's stomach that Nanashi's nightmares had been about him. He wouldn't force himself on anybody, not ever, but the idea of hurting Nanasher like that, it put a bitter taste in his mouth. It made him feel like more of a monster than he ever had, and for Katsuki, that was saying something. But Nanasher had crawled into his arms. Nanasher had asked him to stay. Katsuki's chest felt tight. His hand crept up, and his fingers tangled Nanashi's silken brown curls. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he was still surprised at how soft his hair was, like down against his fingers. It had only been a few weeks since Katsuki had rescued Nanasher from that reeking cesspit, but already, the Omega was precious to him. And it wasn't just because of some artificial resemblance to the boy he once loved. No, he was coming to appreciate Nanasher as a person, as an individual in his own right, not just Izuku's mirror image. And maybe it was because of Izuku that Nanasher felt so familiar, so comforting, but whatever it was, lavender and fresh cotton was quickly becoming one of Katsuki's favorite scents. A small noise slipped through Nanashi's lips, and Katsuki froze, peering down at the sleepy Omega. How long have you been awake? He asked. Nanasher didn't open his eyes, but his cheeks went pink. Only a few minutes. I was comfy and you were playing with my hair. The corners of Nanashi's lips kicked up into a smile. Ah, so you like it when I play with your hair? Nanashi's face was flaming now. Everyone likes it when their hair is played with. I don't, Katsuki said. Well, you. Nanashir shook his head, burying his face in his hands. Ugh, whatever. He started to stand. Katsuki's arms banded around the Omega's abdomen, and he pulled Nanashir back down onto the couch. You don't have to go. I'll play with your hair all you want. Well, it's embarrassing now. You don't have to be embarrassed, Katsuki smirked. I like playing with your hair too. Nanashir buried his face in Katsuki's chest. Katsuki, he whined. What? It's soft and sheet. It's nice. Truthfully, Katsuki was just glad that Nanashir was willing to accept physical affection of any kind. It was a big step for the Omega who, just last night, had flinched away from his touch. Nanashir groaned, hiding his bright red face behind his hands. Fine. I guess I'll make us some breakfast. Katsuki scooted out from underneath Nanashir, taking care not to disturb him too much. After last night, Nanashir must have been exhausted. Nanashir propped himself up on an elbow. What are we having? Today, you have a chance between scrambled eggs or whole wheat pancakes with turkey bacon. Nanashi's eyes lit up. Pancakes? Katsuki quirked a brow. I'm assuming you're a fan? Nanashi's cheeks heated up even more, if that was even possible. I have a bit of a sweet tooth. Katsuki snorted. Of course you do. You better eat the bacon, you need some protein. He started towards the kitchen. Hey, Katsuki? Katsuki stopped dead at the sound of Nanashi's voice, but he didn't turn. Yeah, nerd. Thank you, Nanashir whispered. For last night. You don't have to thank me, Katsuki said. Yes, I do. You were there for me when I needed you. It's been. His eyes fell to his hands, and he shifted nervously on the couch. Well, it's been a long time since somebody did that for me. Katsuki turned, prowling back over to the couch. He leaned down until his gaze was level with Nanashi's. You're not alone anymore, you hear me? Never again. Maybe Katsuki was imagining it, but he thought he caught the gleam of tears in Nanashi's eyes. Yeah, he said. Never again. It had been a couple of weeks, and Nanashir had settled into his new home, which meant it was time to check in with Dr. Suzuki. If she decided everything was going well, Nanashir would stay with Katsuki, checking in with Dr. Suzuki for therapy sessions every 3 days. If she decided something was wrong, Katsuki would never see Nanashir again. Needless to say, Katsuki was agitated. Nanashir was curled up on the couch with his knees pulled to his chest, picking absently at a hangnail. Will you stop pacing? He grumbled. You're making me nervous. I just don't want them to take you away. Nanashir scooted closer, leaning his head on Katsuki's shoulder, and the lavender and fresh cotton scent immediately set Katsuki at ease. He brought his arm up and around Nanashi's shoulders, playing absently with the Omega's split ends. It's up to me what they do with me, isn't it? Nanashir asked. As long as they think you're safe, yeah? Well, then, you have nothing to worry about. I want to stay with you. Katsuki's arm tightened around the Omega, and he glowered. You fucking better. Pulling up the link Dr. Suzuki had sent was a bit awkward with Nanashir in his arms, but Katsuki refused to let go. For this first session, and possibly for quite a few after it, they had agreed that a virtual format was best. Nanashir wasn't quite ready to leave the house yet, but the Omega desperately needed some form of checkup to evaluate his mental health. Katsuki clicked on the link, and Dr. Suzuki's face filled the screen. She looked just as calm and measured as she always did. Her dark hair was sleek, and her glasses were perched on the tip of her nose. Good morning, Nanashir. Mr. Bakugu. It's good to see the two of you. Nanashir ducked his head, casting his eyes to the ground. No doubt this brought up bad memories for him. What had he felt like in that hospital, terrified and confused and all alone? Katsuki rested his hand on Nanashi's back, rubbing soothing circles into his skin with a thumb. Good morning, doctor, he said. Nanashir, there's a chat function on this program, Dr. Suzuki said. I have a couple of questions for you. I'll try not to ask anything too prying for our first session, but I need to check in on your progress and see how you're settling in. Nanashir nodded, eyes darting back and forth between Katsuki and the face on the screen. Alright then, good. Mr. Bakugu, if you could give us some privacy? Katsuki's eyes darted over Nanashi's face. The Omega seemed nervous, more so than he'd been for several days now. Leaving him alone felt wrong, but Nanashir wouldn't meet his gaze. But this appointment mattered. If Katsuki wanted to keep Nanashir close, he had to do what the doctor said. Katsuki swallowed his unease, rising to his feet. "If that's what you think is best," he said. Faster than his eyes could track, Nanashi's hands lashed out, grabbing onto Katsuki's wrist in a grip so tight his knuckles went white. He still wouldn't look at Katsuki. A wrinkle appeared between Katsuki's brows. "Nanashir?" Katsuki murmured, low enough that only Nanashir could hear him. Nanashir couldn't speak, but the plea was clear in his wide, frightened eyes. Katsuki sank back onto the couch, heart squeezing. He rested a hand on Nanashi's knee, just to let him know he was there. Nanashir leaned forward, shaking fingers hovering over the keyboard. After a few seconds of thought, he started to type. "If it's possible, I'd like Katsuki to stay with me." On the screen, Dr. Suzuki leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "If that's what you want, of course it's all right. May I ask why? I know you said you won't ask anything too personal, but I'm still going to have to talk about what happened, won't I? As much as you're willing and able, yes." "It's hard for me to think about," Nanashir typed. He bit his lip. "Harder for me to think about. And Katsuki makes me feel safe. Takes care of me." "Will you be able to speak freely with Mr. Bakugo present?" Dr. Suzuki asked. "I can't have you modifying his answers for your comfort." Nanashi's gaze fell. He looked up at Katsuki, eyes darting over his face, and Katsuki could see the fear and pain in them. Nanashir clenched his hands so hard they shook. And God damn it, but the sight cracked something in Katsuki's chest. He reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind Nanashi's ear. "Nothing you say will make me think of you any differently," he whispered. "Nothing." For a long, agonizing moment, Nanashir only stared at Katsuki. It felt like Katsuki's very soul was being weighed. He just hoped he wouldn't be found wanting. After what seemed like an eternity, Nanashir turned back to the computer. With shaking fingers, he typed, "If I have to talk about what happened, there's no one I'd rather tell than Katsuki. Please, don't make him leave me." Dr. Suzuki nodded, seemingly satisfied. "All right, then Nanashir. Mr. Bakugo can stay." Nanashir released a shaky breath. He forced a smile, but it didn't meet his eyes. Dr. Suzuki's voice gentled. "Don't worry, Nanashir. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." Nanashi's throat worked, but he nodded. "How are you settling into your new environment?" Dr. Suzuki asked. Her pen was poised above her clipboard, and her glasses were perched on the edge of her nose, but her eyes were soft and her smile was kind. "Is Mr. Bakugo treating you well?" Nanashi's cheeks went pink. "Katsuki has been wonderful to me," he said. "Have you two run into any issues?" "No," Nanashir typed out. Katsuki frowned. "Nanashir." Dr. Suzuki's eyes flickered over to him. "Do you have something to add, Mr. Bakugo?" Katsuki shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't want to speak over Nanashir, and the transition has been going smoothly overall, but there've been a few bumps in the road. I addressed them as best as I could, but I'm not a medical professional. It might be better if we got your advice." Dr. Suzuki folded her hands in her lap. "Nanashir?" Nanashir turned his face away and said nothing. "I can't help you if you're not honest with me." Nanashir only shook his head. "Would you object if Mr. Bakugo told me about some of his concerns?" she asked softly. Nanashir hesitated, but after a moment, he shook his head. Dr. Suzuki turned to face him. "All right then. Mr. Bakugo, I don't know. I worry." Katsuki ran an agitated hand through his hair. "He has nightmares, bad ones, from what I've seen. One of them was about me." Katsuki's heart thudded painfully, and he couldn't bring himself to meet Nanashi's eyes. "He said he feels scared all the time. And when he first got here, he thought I was only taking him in so I could, you know." "What?" Dr. Suzuki ped her herd to the side. Katsuki winced. "He thought I was going to RP him." "I see," Dr. Suzuki said. She made a note on her clipboard. That's not entirely unexpected after what he's been through, but I have to ask, Nanashir, has Mr. Bakugo done anything to make you feel unsafe? Vehemently, Nanashir shook his head. Tears glistened in his eyes, but he blinked them away before they could fall. Katsuki leaned forward, catching Nanashi's eye. You can talk to me, Nanashir. I never want to hurt you. He shook his head again, biting down hard on his lower lip. It's all right, Nanashir, Dr. Suzuki soothed. Nanashir lunged for the keyboard, fingers shaking. The message he typed out was hurried. Katsuki wouldn't have been surprised if he could hardly even see the screen through his tears. Please, don't take me, Aoya. Katsuki's breath caught. No one's going to take you away, Nanashir, Dr. Suzuki soothed. Her voice was gentle. Not over something like this. What you're experiencing is totally normal after what you've been through. It makes sense that your subconscious would be frightened of a large, intimidating alpha, even if he's been treating you well. Nanashi's lower lip was trembling. He swiped hastily at the tears tracking down his cheeks with the back of his hand. Dr. Suzuki made another note on her clipboard. It seems that you're experiencing symptoms of PTSD. She looked up at him. This doesn't make you weak, Nanashir. After escaping a traumatic situation, your brain is trying to protect you from getting hurt again. It might take you a long time to stop reacting to things from a place of fear, but as long as you have a good support system in place, you should be able to manage it. Nanashir nodded again, but his knuckles were white from how hard he was clenching his fists. Can you tell me how you're feeling when you have these reactions? Dr. Suzuki said. Nanashir hesitated, and he had to bite down on his lower lip to keep it from trembling. I know I'm safe, he typed eventually. In my head, I know it, but the rest of me hasn't quite figured that out yet. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is all too good to be true, and if I let myself hope that it's real, it's only going to hurt more when it all comes crashing down. Katsuki tore his gaze away. Goddamn it, but hated this feeling, this powerlessness. He wanted to grab Nanashir around the waist and bundle him in blankets and let him know that it was all going to be okay. I see, Dr. Suzuki said. Her voice sounded even, but her eyes were sad. I understand that this is hard for you to talk about, but the more you can tell us about what you experienced while you were being trafficked, the more we can help. Nanashi's hands hovered over the keyboard. For a long moment he was still. When he finally typed out his message and hit send, his words hurt Katsuki worse than a knife to the gut. They hurt me, Nanashir said simply. Dr. Suzuki's fingers tightened around the pen in her hand. Can you elaborate on that? The alphas came, took what they wanted, and left. Nanashi's eyes were far away, like he was lost in the memory. It didn't matter what they wanted, it was different every time. And as the only male Omega, I had a lot of visitors. Katsuki had to clench his teeth to rein in the low, rumbling growl that was building in his chest. He didn't want to hear about it, didn't want to think about it. He hadn't known Nanashir for long, but the Omega was so small. So sweet and terrified and innocent. He couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that anybody could ever hurt him. And when he remembered that Nanashir couldn't have been older than 15 when he was taken, Katsuki was a hero. He was supposed to save people. But if he ever got his hands on the people who had done this to Nanashir, he wouldn't hesitate to tear them apart. When the heroes found you, you were in bad shape, Dr. Suzuki said. Did they hurt you when you didn't do what they wanted? Sometimes. Sometimes, they hurt me even if I did exactly what they said. They just wanted to see me scream. Nanashi's throat worked, and Katsuki thought he saw the glimmer of tears in his eyes. Sometimes, they were gentle, and I think that was the worst part. Even though they were kinder than the others, they still saw me as something they could use and throw away. They didn't even see me as human. You must have felt very powerless. I did. How did you respond to that powerlessness? Nanashi's hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, before he typed out, I tried to kill myself. And those words, Katsuki would have gladly destroyed himself to never again hear Nanashir speak those words. I see. Dr. Suzuki made another note on her clipboard, and Katsuki wanted to scream. Was that really all she had to say? May I ask how many times? Lost count. Nanashi's hands were trembling where they hovered above the keyboard. When I was found, I was starving myself to death, that's why I'm so malnourished. Eventually they started forcing the food down my throat. Dr. Suzuki crossed her legs, leaning forward enough that Nanashire was forced to meet her eyes. Nanashire, I have to ask. Do you still feel like hurting yourself? No, Nanashire hurried to reassure her, and Katsuki felt his shoulders relax just a bit. Are you sure? Dr. Suzuki insisted. I need you to be honest with me, Nanashire. The Omega's eyes flickered to the ground. His face was pale, and tears were brimming in his emerald eyes. Katsuki's heart dropped. Nanashi's breath hitched. I don't know. Dr. Suzuki let out a slow, deep breath. All right, thank you for being honest. She leaned forward, eyes wide and insistent. Nanashire, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If you ever feel the urge to hurt yourself, I need you to tell Katsuki immediately. If you can't come to Katsuki, please come to me. You have a support system, and hurting yourself is not the answer. Do you understand me? Katsuki thought he heard Nanashire typing, but he couldn't make out the screen. His head was spinning. His vision blurred, and he was flooded by memories from so long ago. Kaken sugoi. Blood on the pavement like a crimson halo. Deku. That must be what you call a helpless loser who's completely useless. Red and blue flashing lights. Mat yo, Kaken. Inko Midoriya screams when she learned her baby was never coming home. Why are you being so mean, Kaken? Burying an empty coffin in the pouring rain. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building. An empty desk behind his own. Quirkless loser, useless extra. Datsuki. Katsuki. Katsuki. Katsuki came back to himself at the sound of Dr. Suzuki's voice. He SCK'd in a breath, the another, but it didn't matter, because no matter how deeply he breathed, he couldn't get enough air into his lungs. He started breathing faster, but it felt like he was choking on nothing, like no matter how much air he took in, he could never be satisfied. It felt like his heart was going to explode. Nanashire placed a hand on Katsuki's shoulder, but pulled it away just as quickly when Katsuki flinched. Nanashi's lips moved, but no sound came out. Kaken, wait for me. Katsuki squeezed his eyes shut against the onslaught of memories, clutching the skin over his heart. He was going to die, and what would happen to Nanashire? Katsuki. Dr. Suzuki's voice filtered through the computer screen. Katsuki, I need you to talk to me. What's going on? Goddammit, his chest burned. Can't breathe, he forced out. Dying? You're not dying, Katsuki. Suzuki soothed. You're having a panic attack. I can't. F dash. Katsuki slammed his fist into the coffee table, sending cracks spiderwebbing through the glass. Something shifted on the couch next to him. In the next second, small, cold hands cupped Katsuki's face, forcing him to look into wide green eyes. And goddammit, those eyes. They destroyed him. Broke him down and rebuilt him, shattered his world and put it back together again. He wanted to lose himself in them. Those eyes looked like solace. They looked like hope. Idatsu.ku? Those beautiful eyes went wide with shock, and the hands fell away from Katsuki's face. No, Katsuki, Dr. Suzuki's voice soothed. That's Nanashire. And suddenly, everything slammed into Katsuki with the force of a blow. Nanashire, this was Nanashire, the Omega he'd sworn to protect, the one who had already been through far, far too much. The one who had already experienced enough pain that he thought it was better to end his life, who had suffered so deeply he'd tried multiple times. When he'd heard Nanashire admit to it, all admit to wanting to hurt himself, he'd lost it. Here was another green-eyed Omega he swore to protect, another sweet boy with a fragile smile he'd promised to save. Another lost soul who hurt so badly he wanted to end it all. Another person who Katsuki had failed to save. And if Nanashire hurt himself again, if Nanashire wound up like Izuku, damn it, Katsuki couldn't breathe. His hands lashed out, and he seized Nanashi's hands, pulling them towards him. Sure enough, he saw them faintly raised scars on the pale, delicate skin of his wrists. The memories came flooding back, but this time it was Nanashi's blood on the pavement, a gravestone with Nanashi's name on it, and Katsuki couldn't breathe. You have to promise me, Nanashir, he gasped. Promise me you won't hurt yourself. Ever. Nanashi's eyes were wide. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Katsuki's hands tightened on Nanashi's wrists, and when he spoke, his voice was a snarl. Promise me, Nanashir. Mr. Bakugo, Dr. Suzuki snapped. You're scaring him. Katsuki blinked. Sure enough, the look in Nanashi's eyes, that was fear. He was afraid. He was afraid of Katsuki. Katsuki released Nanashi's wrists like they'd burned him, rocketing up from the couch with his hands balled into fists at his sides. I have to go. Nanashi's lips parted. He made to reach for Katsuki, but Katsuki flinched away before he could. Katsuki stumbled back towards the doorway, clutching his head with a hand. His fingers felt blindly for the doorknob. When he found it, he turned it and pushed. The door swung open with a sound like a scream. Nanashir was still sitting on the couch, looking at Katsuki with eyes that were so sad, so scared. Eyes that held too many terrors for his 22 years. Izuku's eyes. Katsuki's hand tightened on the door handle. I'm sorry, he whispered. And then he closed the door behind him. Katsuki didn't know how he'd ended up here, at the dried-up creek bed that had once been full of water. The log stretching over the creek had once seemed so high, but now, it barely came up to Katsuki's shoulder. It was here that everything had changed so many years ago, here that Katsuki's pride and ambition had hardened his heart. The boy he loved reached out a hand to save him, and Katsuki pushed it away. Even after so many years, the memories had yet to fade. He remembered what Izuku's smile looked like. It was so wide, so bright, it looked like it hurt his face. He still remembered what Izuku's curls felt like against his fingertips, still remembered what his voice sounded like when he got excited. But as the years passed, Izuku stopped smiling. His passion for heroes never faded, but Katsuki didn't get to see it anymore. He started to cower when he saw Katsuki in the halls. Katsuki wished he paid more attention. He wished he remembered what the last thing Izuku said to him was, but he didn't. He just remembered tears welling in remarkable green eyes, staring you down round cheeks as explosions popped in Katsuki's hands. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there actually might be another way. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. Katsuki never thought Izuku would listen to him. Goddammit, why had the idiot listened? Katsuki's legs went weak, and he fell to his knees in the dirt. It took him a minute to realize he was crying, breath hitching, shoulders shaking, tears seething down his cheeks. He clutched at his chest, like if he clawed out his heart, the pain would go away. He wished he could just stop thinking. He wished that the thoughts didn't haunt him, playing on repeat through Katsuki's head. But Katsuki couldn't stop thinking. He wondered what Deku's last thoughts were before he took that final dive. Did he stretch his arms out over his head? Did he pretend he could fly, just like All Might? Or did he simply let himself fall? Did he close his eyes, or did he watch as the ground approached? Did he think of Katsuki? Did he regret it the moment before he hit the ground? Since becoming a pro hero, Katsuki had saved 72 people from suicide attempts. But for the one person he actually cared about, he had been too late. Katsuki leaned back against the wall of the dried-up creek bed. He could almost see Izuku walking across that fallen log. He could almost hear the rushing water and Izuku's laugh in the air. They'd been so small back then, back when Katsuki had fallen and Izuku had offered his hand. Why hadn't Katsuki taken his hand? He regretted it, all of it, every day. He regretted everything he'd done almost as much as he regretted everything he hadn't done. He'd burned the hands he longed to hold, insulted the face he wanted to kiss, filled the eyes he loved so dearly to the brim with tears. And then there was everything he'd never gotten the chance to say. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. You're perfect. I love you. And Nanashir wasn't Izuku. Katsuki knew he wasn't. It wasn't fair for him to conflate the two in his mind. But Katsuki didn't just care about Nanashir because he reminded him of Izuku. He cared because Nanashir was good, innocent, and kind in a way that Katsuki wasn't. In a way he could never be. He cared because he wanted to be better than he was. He cared because Nanashir deserved so much better than what he had been given, because the world had taken something so precious, so beautiful, and broken it beyond repair. He cared because for whatever reason he couldn't help his urge to protect Nanashur. Katsuki reached up, clutching his hair so tightly it hurt. His knees were curled to his chest. In all his life, he'd never felt more weak. Because when Nanashur had said those words, it had wrecked Katsuki utterly and completely. Watching history repeat itself was more than Katsuki could bear. In his mind, he saw two green-eyed Omegas side by side, both soft and smiling, placing their trust in Katsuki. Trust he didn't deserve. Both hurt so badly that they wanted to end it all. Katsuki's chest ached. And now, Katsuki had fed up again. He was supposed to be there for Nanashur. He was supposed to help him, protect him. He'd shared something so vulnerable, a piece of his past that must have hurt so badly to speak aloud. It's hard for me to think about. Harder for me to talk about. But he had trusted Katsuki. He'd wanted Katsuki by his side. He'd let Katsuki hold him all night long, let him card his fingers through his hair. And Katsuki had wasted that trust. Katsuki makes me feel safe. Takes care of me. Nanashur had asked him to stay, and Katsuki had run. Katsuki forced himself to his feet, clenching his hands into fists. He needed to go back. When Katsuki stepped back into the apartment, Nanashur was sitting on the couch with his knees curled to his chest. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. He looked up when he heard the door opening. When he saw Katsuki standing there, he stiffened. He bit down on his lower lip to keep it from wobbling. Nanashur was talking before Katsuki even had a chance to say anything. "I'm sorry," he blurted out, a tear running down his cheek. "I'm sorry you had to hear all of that. I'm sorry I asked you to stay. I shouldn't have." "Stop it," Katsuki said, and in an instant, the Omega fell silent. He sighed, dragging a hand down his face, but when he spoke again, his voice had softened. "Please stop it. Nanashur, hearing what happened to you breaks my heart, but that's only because I care about you. You understand that, don't you?" Nanashur turned his face away. "I don't want to burden you," he whispered. Katsuki walked towards the frightened Omega slowly, so as not to startle him. He sank down onto the opposite side of the couch, sitting with his legs crossed and his body facing Nanashur. "You're not a burden. A burden is a load you're forced to bear, but I choose to share this weight with you. I choose to be by your side, now and for however long you need me." Katsuki let out a slow, deep breath, digging his nails into his palms. "I'm the one who should be sorry, Nanashur. I shouldn't have run away like that. I was scared and I was overwhelmed, but that doesn't make it okay." Nanashur was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet that Katsuki almost missed it. "Katsuki?" "Yeah," Katsuki said. Nanashur worried on his lower lip. "What happened?" he asked. Katsuki sighed, closing his eyes like he could block out the memories that swarmed him. "There are some ugly parts of my past, Nanashur. When I heard what you said, they came back to me." Nanashur picked absently at a loose string on the couch. "Ugly how?" Katsuki's heart plummeted. This moment was what he had been afraid of since he took Nanashur in. He knew that someday he'd have to tell Nanashur about his past, about why he'd agreed to look after Nanashur for seemingly no reason at all. He just hadn't expected the day to come so soon. "Are you sure you want to know?" Katsuki asked. His voice was a low rumble. "It's not a pretty story and, well, you might not think of me the same after you hear it." "Nothing you say is going to make me run away," Nanashur whispered, echoing Katsuki's words from last night back to him. His gaze locked onto Katsuki's, eyes peering up from beneath long, green lashes. Katsuki's heart stuttered. The thought came to him unbidden, beautiful. Nanashur was beautiful. Katsuki wouldn't let himself break Nanashi's gaze. He was waiting for them to fill with hatred. He knew he deserved it. "Do you remember what I said the other day?" Katsuki said. "How I was so angry all the time, how I took my anger out on someone who didn't deserve it?" Nanashur nodded. "I remember. His name was Deku no Izuku." Katsuki caught himself before he let the nickname slip. Izuku deserved better than that he always had. Katsuki shook his head. "His name was Izuku." Nanashi's eyes widened and he flinched. He must have recognized the name Katsuki called him earlier. I'd known him since the time I could walk, Katsuki explained. Growing up, we were always together. We were practically joined at the hip. He huffed a sad, broken laugh, thinking about the tiny, green-haired boy who used to trail him around. Did they really used to be that small? He couldn't pronounce my name at first. He had trouble with S sounds, so he called me Kakin, and we played heroes together, and he was my best friend. A lump rose in Katsuki's throat, and he had to clear it before continuing. He was a stupidly good person, he choked out. You wouldn't believe how kind he was, how kind he'd always been. He wanted to be a hero just like All Might, but he didn't want the praise. He just wanted to be able to help people. Nanashir was blinking fast, trying and failing to hold back tears. They streaked down his cheeks, turning his eyes red and his cheeks pink. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I was not a good person, Katsuki forced out. Not like he was. I could make excuses all day. I could tell you that my mom used to beat the shit out of me, that I was scared and angry all the time, that I hated myself so much I thought I hated everybody else. But it doesn't excuse any of the things I did to him. Katsuki shook his head. He was trembling. He dug his nails into his palms, hoping the pain would center him, focus him. Deku Izuku was quirkless. And God, I treated him like shit over it. I taunted him, I pushed him around. I told him he could never be a hero. And even then, he was always so effing kind to me. Katsuki buried his face in his hands. I hated it. Every day, I wished for him to lash out at me, because then I could stop feeling like such a piece of shit every time I hurt him. Eventually I started to think he was looking down on me. And that only made me angrier. Nanashi's shaking hand had come up to cover his mouth. He must hate me now, Katsuki thought, but he wouldn't let himself stop. Nanashir deserved to know the truth. When I heard that Izuku was trying out for UA, I was furious. I think a part of me was scared. The UA entrance exam is notoriously dangerous, and he was defenseless. Katsuki braced himself for the words he had to speak, tearing his gaze away from Nanashi's at long last. After Nanashir knew, he would see what a monster Katsuki really was. I told him not to do it, he breathed. I told him that if he was so desperate to be a hero, he should take a swan dive off the roof of the building and hope he'd be born with a quirk in his next life. Nanashi's breath hitched. Katsuki's chest burned with the effort it took to keep his tears inside. Izuku went missing later that night, and it was at that moment I realized I'd effed up. I'd effed up so badly I could never fix it, no matter how hard I tried. Search parties were formed, and I went out with them. I couldn't sleep for the entire time he was missing. I just wanted, his voice cracked. I just wanted to bring him home. The apartment was silent but for Katsuki's labored breathing and Nanashi's racking sobs. Every word was a struggle, but Katsuki couldn't stop now. 3 days later, they found something, a pool of dried blood on the ground. They tested it and it was his. It was in a bad part of town, beneath the tallest building in the area. There was no body, but with the amount of blood, the coroner said someone his age couldn't have survived that amount of blood loss. He'd really done it, he'd really jumped. And he was gone. Katsuki couldn't bring himself to say that word dead. He didn't want to think about it. He wanted to hold on to the memory of Izuku as shining and brilliant, beautiful and untouchable. He didn't want to think of the bloodstains on the sidewalk. He didn't want to think about the empty coffin buried in the rain. We still don't know what happened to his body, but All Might caught a sludge villain in the area 4 days later. Their best guess was that he'd jumped, and the slime villain had occupied his corpse before abandoning the body in a ditch somewhere. We buried an empty coffin and I never got to say goodbye. Katsuki's voice dropped until it was barely more than a whisper. Not that I deserve to. You have his eyes, Nanashir, Katsuki continued, finally forcing himself to meet Nanashi's gaze. So many days, so many tears, so many shared moments, all boiled down to this moment. I want to say I'd help anybody the way I'm helping you, but I don't think it's true. Your hair is different, and you don't have freckles, and you're skinnier than he was. But if Izuku had had the chance to grow up, I think he would have looked a lot like you. Izuku couldn't believe what he was hearing. Kakin cared about him? Kakin had missed him? He wanted to scream. He wanted to cry. He wanted to try and deny it, but he couldn't, not when there was so much pain in Kaken's eyes. Not when Kaken was so much kinder than he used to be. Gentler. Still rough around the edges, but softened, somehow. By time? Or by tragedy? The words were on the tip of his tongue, begging to be spoken. It's me, Kaken. It's Deku. But they wouldn't come. And Izuku, for the first time since Kaken had told him about Kirishima, Izuku felt angry. That's why you're helping me? Izuku's voice was ice cold. He almost didn't recognize it. Because you feel guilty? Because you think you can fix what you did back then? No, Kaken said, and Izuku had never seen his eyes look like that. He looked dead. I know I can't fix it. Izuku's shoulders shook with heaving, silent sobs. He wanted to scream. What right did Kaken have to feel guilty? To grieve him? How could he even claim to care about Izuku after he had tormented him for years? How was Izuku supposed to get past it? He thought he'd forgiven Kaken, but it seemed that the resentment had yet to fade entirely. It was easier when he believed that Kaken didn't care. It was one thing to hurt someone innocent, but to hurt someone you claimed to love? It was unfathomable. And as for forgiveness? It was out of the question. After all, what happened to Izuku was Kaken's fault, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Was it? For the life of him, Izuku didn't know the answer. Izuku couldn't wrap his head around it all. His breath hitched. Then why? He whispered. What is all of this for? Because I cared about Izuku. Deeply. Katsuki's words trailed off, and he ran a shaking hand down his face. I know, all right? I know you're not him. But when I first saw you, I thought you were. That's why I got so possessive that first day when we found you. I practically attacked Kirishima. It's because I thought you were him. So it's because I look like a dead man? No, that's not it. But Katsuki shook his head, burying his face in his hands. Goddammit, I'm no good at this. You remind me of him, and not just because of the way you look. At first, yeah, but it's more than that now. Because you think I'm weak? Izuku's voice was shaking. All the terrible things Katsuki had said over the years echoed around inside his skull, getting louder every second. You think I'm powerless? You think I need protecting? No. It's because you're kind. Katsuki's voice cracked. He looked up, meeting Izuku's eyes, and Izuku was shocked to see tears in his blood-red gaze. Nanisher, I know that I'm not going to be the one to save you. I'll help you on your journey as much as you'll let me, but you are going to be the one to save yourself. It's selfish of me, but I'm hoping that maybe you'll save me too. You're better than I am. Just like he was. And the pain, the desolation in Katsuki's voice. Izuku had never heard anything like it. He never thought he'd see Kaken grieving, especially not over him. And the hard knot of anger in Izuku's gut began to soften, just a bit. Just enough. I'm not the same person you lost, Izuku whispered. And he wasn't the Izuku Katsuki knew was gone. The person sitting in front of him was an empty, broken shell, a husk of who he used to be. Katsuki remembered Izuku as innocent, as pure. As if the boy sitting in front of him wasn't covered in filth, dirtier than the disgusting city streets they thought he had died on. I know, Katsuki replied. His voice was hardly more than a whisper. I know you're not him. Izuku's throat worked. And if you're looking for forgiveness, I can't give it to you. I know that too. Katsuki shook his head, turning his face away. Listen, just forget I said anything. Katsuki, wait. Izuku lunged, wrapping his hand around Katsuki's wrist. Kaken was so warm, he'd always been so warm. He shone so bright when they were younger that it was no surprise that his touch burned. But in the weeks since Katsuki had taken him in, Izuku had seen a different side of him. A warmth that was used to heal, not hurt. A fire that brought life, not destruction. I can't forgive you for what you did, Izuku whispered. But I see you, Katsuki. You're not a bad person. Your heart is good. I think Izuku would have known it too. Katsuki's gaze shuddered. Don't say that shit. Okay. Katsuki. Stop. Katsuki's voice was as cold and hard as steel. It was my fault, Nanisher. He's dead and it's all my fault. Gently, he extracted his wrist from Izuku's grasp and stood. He started towards the kitchen. Whatever. I'm going to start on dinner. More tears spilled down Izuku's cheeks. Why do you always do that? He demanded, the embers in his chest catching fire once again. Do what? Katsuki asked. You expect me to bare my soul to you to tell you things I've done and things that have been done to me. Things that disgust me. Things that should disgust you too. Izuku's voice cracked, and he swiped at his tears angrily with the back of his hand. But the second you get uncomfortable, the second things get just a little bit real, you pull away and you leave me behind. A plea entered his voice. Don't leave, Katsuki. Katsuki turned his head, and suddenly, Izuku saw why he was so desperate to get away. Katsuki was crying. Nanisher, I want to be strong for you. I need to be strong for you. I promise to keep you safe, so I can't let you see how fed up I am. I just can't. I don't need you to be strong, Izuku begged. He could feel his heart breaking as he looked up at Kaken, the strongest person he'd ever known who was crying over him. He couldn't forgive Kaken, and yet, I just need you to be here with me. Izuku stretched out his hand, letting it hang before him in open invitation. Katsuki's eyes guttered when he saw it. Izuku knew he was remembering that day by the creek, just like Izuku was that day Izuku had reached for Katsuki, asking the Alpha to let him in. That day when Katsuki had pushed him away. When it had all fallen apart. Katsuki only stared at Izuku's palm. At the scars on his wrists and hands, at his long, slender fingers that had been broken so many times. And Izuku braced himself for Kaken to turn his back. To walk away. But Katsuki took his hand. Izuku pulled Katsuki back onto the couch just as the Alpha broke into pieces, shoulders shaking, chest heaving as the tears poured from his eyes. Izuku reached out, tentative as he wrapped his arms around Kaken, but the Alpha didn't push him away. He buried his nose in Izuku's throat, breathing in the scent of lavender and fresh cotton. Don't hurt yourself, Nanisher, Katsuki begged, hands balling into fists in the front of Izuku's t-shirt. I couldn't survive it. Not again. Izuku's heart splintered. I won't. You can't leave me, Kaken begged. Where would I go? Izuku held the weeping Alpha close to his chest, watching as Katsuki broke down. He held Kaken, just as Kaken had held him. He murmured sweet nothings under his breath, running a soothing hand down Katsuki's back. Katsuki was allowing himself to be weak. And more than anything else, that felt like a step in the right direction. For the second morning in a row, Izuku woke up on the couch with Kaken pressed against him. This time, though, he was the one holding Kaken. The Alpha's head was resting against his chest, his breathing deep and even. His ash-blonde hair was mused, his face was tear-stained. For the first time since Izuku had met him so many years ago, he looked small. Warmth bubbled up in Izuku's chest. His anger hadn't faded entirely, but after Kaken had broken down in his arms last night, it had lost its bite. He didn't need to punish Kaken anymore. Kaken was already punishing himself far more than he deserved. And knowing that Kaken cared about him enough to grieve him, it meant more than Izuku could say. All Izuku had ever wanted was for Kaken to notice him. He was going to tell him. He had to tell him. Kaken deserved to know the identity of the Omega holding him in his arms. He didn't deserve to grieve over someone who was still within his reach. Izuku reached out, carding his fingers through Kaken's hair, the same way Kaken had done for him. The Alpha stirred on his chest, eyes blinking open when he felt Izuku's hands on him. He squinted, looking up at Izuku without pulling away. Good morning, Izuku said. Morning, Katsuki grunted. His voice was rough and gravely with sleep, and it rumbled through Izuku when he spoke. Feelings swarmed in Izuku's chest, things he thought he'd left behind 9 years ago. A small smile kicked up the corners of Izuku's lips as he stared down at the Alpha. Hey, Katsuki? Kaken grunted. Thank you, Izuku whispered. For telling me. Kaken's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Thank you for listening. For not running away. I'm not going to run away from you, Izuku said. He breathed deep, taking in the smell of burnt caramel and spice. After all these years, Kaken still smelled like home. Katsuki's crimson eyes were wide, haunted. Even though I deserve it? He whispered. Izuku nodded. Even then. Katsuki let out a long, heavy sigh. His head sank back down onto Izuku's chest, submitting himself to the Omega's ministrations as his hands ran through Katsuki's hair. It seemed like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, like after all this time, he could finally breathe. Izuku's fingers stilled in Kaken's hair. This was it, this was his chance to come clean. To make it all okay again. Katsuki, do you wish I was Izuku? Katsuki raised his head, his tortured eyes locking onto Izuku's. And when he spoke, his words hit Izuku like a punch in the gut. No, Kaken said firmly. No, I don't. A lump rose in Izuku's throat. You don't. Katsuki shook his head. I know it's horrible, but it hurts more to think that he's been alive and hurting all this time. It's easier to believe that he's really gone. His voice broke and he turned his face away. At least then he's not in pain. Izuku's heart thudded painfully. That's not what he expected to hear, not what he wanted to hear. He swallowed. What about his family? He asked. It's just his mom, Katsuki said. His piece of sheet dad left when he was just a baby. And she? Izuku's hands tightened in Katsuki's hair, his voice hardly more than a whisper. I mean, doesn't she miss him? Of course she does, Katsuki said, voice rough. Misses him more than anything. Losing Izuku destroyed her. But God, if Izuku was alive and in pain this whole time. Kaken ran a trembling hand down his face, shaking his head. I don't think she'd ever recover from that. I don't think any of us would. The words died in Izuku's throat. He couldn't tell Katsuki, not now. He couldn't tell anybody. He didn't want to hurt them more than he had already. Izuku turned his face away, blinking fast. He knew he shouldn't have let himself hope. It was better this way. Of course it was. Izuku was only a burden on the people he loved. He always had been. Katsuki's voice gentled. Nanisher, I know you're not Izuku, and I don't want you to be. He reached up, taking Izuku's face in his hand and turning it until their eyes met. I just want you to be you. Izuku nodded, forcing a smile. He hoped that Kaken didn't see the tears in his eyes. Maybe it was better that Izuku Midoriya remained dead. In the 4 days since Katsuki had told Nanisher about Izuku, the Omega had been acting strangely. He seemed quieter, sadder. He was slower to look Katsuki in the eye. Katsuki knew this would happen. Of course Nanisher couldn't feel the same way about him now, not after he learned the truth about who Katsuki was. But there was still warmth in Nanashi's emerald eyes when they met Katsuki's, and he'd held Katsuki all night while he fell apart in his arms. After everything, Nanisher hadn't given up on Katsuki. Hope wasn't lost yet. It had been 4 weeks since they'd found Nanisher in that reeking cesspit, 3 since he'd started to live with Katsuki, and even after such a short time, he seemed better every day. He was finally able to eat solid foods, and while he was still much too skinny for Katsuki's liking, his ribs no longer protruded so prominently from his stomach. He still woke up with nightmares, but the bags under his eyes weren't so dark anymore. He smiled more easily these days. And Katsuki couldn't help it. The way his heart swelled when Nanisher grinned. The way his breath caught when Nanashi's eyes sparkled. He couldn't help wanting to do everything he could to make the Omega happy, because it hurt so badly to see him cry. And as of today, Nanisher was officially deemed healthy enough to dissolve his meal plan. For the first time since Nanisher had been rescued, Katsuki could cook whatever the F he wanted, and he was damn well going to make the best FING dinner Nanisher had ever had. The thought made Katsuki's chest coil with stupid alpha pride. He was focused on the simmering pan on his stovetop when Nanisher wandered into the room. Katsuki? Katsuki grunted, far too focused on his meal to look away. I think I'm going to start a load of laundry, Nanisher continued. I don't have many clothes to begin with, and I'm starting to run out of things to wear. Do you have anything you want me to toss in? Katsuki turned with a scowl, just long enough to face the Omega standing at the other end of the kitchen. You don't have to do the FA. The words promptly died in his throat. Katsuki knew, objectively speaking, that Nanisher was good-looking. He'd noticed it himself more than once since he'd taken Nanisher in moments when the Omega had looked up at him from underneath long green lashes, those emerald eyes wide, and the only thought that came to Katsuki's head was that Nanashire was beautiful. But for the first time, Katsuki felt struck stupid. Nanashire was leaning against the wall, brown hair tied into a messy bun at the top of his head. He looked relaxed. Maybe not happy, but content. He was more at ease than Katsuki had ever seen him. But the thing that made Katsuki stop in his tracks was Nanashi's clothes. He really must have been running low on things to wear, because one of Katsuki's shirts was draped over his frame. It was several sizes too large, and the neckline hung off one of Nanashi's shoulders, exposing his pale, thin chest and sweeping collarbones. The bite marks littering his skin still made Katsuki's blood run cold, but for once, it wasn't enough to swamp the heat currently sweeping through him. But if seeing Nanashire in Katsuki's own clothes wasn't enough, the sinfully tiny gym shorts he was wearing most definitely were. When Katsuki had bought them, Nanashire had been so underweight that the fabric had been baggy. But after a month of regular meals, Nanashire could fill them out, and now they were tight across but that had Katsuki seeing stars. And they were short, leaving practically nothing to the imagination. The entirety of Nanashi's milky pale thighs was revealed to him covered in the scars of cuts and bite marks, but no less beautiful for it. And with the amount of skin on display, Katsuki noticed something he hadn't before. Freckles. Nanashire had freckles. There weren't many, certainly not as many as Izuku had had, but they were there, tiny and delicate, littered like stars across the skin of his legs, his chest, the bridge of his nose. The more time Nanashire spent in the sun, Katsuki knew, the more those freckles would reveal themselves, until he was absolutely covered. Nanashire pulled his plump lower lip between his teeth, worrying at it nervously. But that little habit had never affected Katsuki the way it was doing now. Katsuki? Katsuki's gaze snapped up from where he'd been staring at Nanashi's mouth. Damn it, he needed to get himself under control. What? He asked, voice gravelly. Nanashire was staring at him like he'd suddenly lost his mind. Your laundry? All right. I can do the laundry, Katsuki croaked. That's silly. You're already cooking. Nanashire pet his hip, leaning against the doorframe. You have a washer and dryer in your apartment, right? I'll just throw a few things in. You don't have to, Katsuki protested. I want to. Nanashire shrugged. It makes me feel useful. Besides, doing ordinary tasks like that is nice. Methodical. His gaze dropped to the tile, and he picked absently at a hangnail. It reminds me that I'm really here, you know? Oh, alright then. Katsuki cleared his throat. I have a few things that you could throw in for me. Lead the way, Nanashire said. I'll be right there. Katsuki left the vegetables simmering on the stovetop as he made his way into his room, haphazardly grabbing the laundry hamper from where it leaned against his dresser. He didn't have too much in the way of laundry, but then, Nanashire had significantly less clothes than he did. They would have to fix that. Nanashire knocked softly against the doorframe, a half-full laundry basket propped against his hip. A few wisps of dark hair had escaped his bun and now framed his face. He looked soft and sweet and utterly perfect standing there, his scent threading through the air, and Katsuki's heart clenched in his chest. You can come in, Katsuki said. Just set the basket on the bed. Nanashire wandered inside slowly, eyes darting around Katsuki's space. He placed the basket down absently, running a hand over Katsuki's comforter. You know, he said casually, I don't think I've ever seen your room before. Katsuki blinked. Really? Nanashire made a soft noise of affirmation in the back of his throat. Well, it's nothing special. Katsuki shrugged, looking around at the bare white walls, dark blue comforter, and sparse furniture. The only thing that really gave the room any character was the bookshelf by the window, filled with books, journals, and Katsuki's face heated his fairly large collection of romance manga. It's not what I expected, Nanashire said, breaking Katsuki out of his thoughts. What were you expecting? Katsuki asked. I don't know. It's just so sparse. Katsuki supplied. Plain? Boring. Nanashi's lips twisted up at the corners. I was going to say it more nicely than that. Katsuki snorted. Don't worry about sugarcoating it, he said. I've been a homebody for the past couple of weeks, but most of the time, I'm not at the house a lot. I work overtime, I don't take vacations, and on the weekends, I try to spend as little time here as possible. A crease appeared between Nanashi's brows. Why? Katsuki shrugged. This apartment is a place for me to crash and shower and not die of exposure, but it's never really been a home. There's nothing here for me. I have no family and hardly any friends, and I don't know. He shoved his hands into his pockets, feeling suddenly self-conscious for no reason at all. It gets lonely. Katsuki had never admitted that before, not even to himself. And now? Nanashir studied him, his head ped to the side. I mean, now that you're stuck here with me. Do you resent me for keeping you here? Katsuki stepped forward, invading Nanashir's personal space. The Omega kept his gaze trained on the ground, and his breath was hot where it fanned out against Katsuki's chest. Katsuki lifted Nanashi's chin with a finger, forcing the Omega to look him in the eye. I could never resent you, Nanashir, but more importantly, this place is different than it was before. You're here now. I like taking care of things, that's why I always wanted to be a hero. And if the apartment was lonely before, it isn't anymore. You've breathed life into this place. Nanashi's eyes were wide and glistening. That's... His breath hitched, his gaze flickering over Katsuki's face. I mean, that means a lot to me. It's been a while since I've had a place to call home. Well, that's what I'd like this place to be. A home, Katsuki breathed. They were still standing too close, but Katsuki couldn't bring himself to pull away from the heat of Nanashi's body. For both of us. The tiniest of smiles graced Nanashi's lips. I like that. Nanashi's tongue darted out, wetting his lips. Katsuki. Katsuki's gaze had dropped to Nanashi's lips, and he was having trouble thinking about anything other than what they would taste like. The Omega's button nose crinkled, his eyes darting toward the door. Is something burning? And just like that, the moment was broken. Katsuki's head snapped up. Sheet. He tore out of the room and into the kitchen, where sure enough a charred, burning smell was thick enough to choke on. Katsuki turned off the stove, staring in dismay at the charred ruin of the meal he'd worked so hard on. He wanted to break something. But in the back of his mind, a tiny voice whispered that maybe this was for the best. He knew himself well enough to realize that he might have kissed Nanashir if they'd been in that room together for 1 second longer, with Nanashi's fresh scent and short shorts taunting him. He swore to himself then and there that he would never let something like that happen again ever. Because Nanashir was off limits. Like it or not, the Omega had been traumatized beyond belief enough that he had nightmares about his caretaker assaulting him and had truly believed, for a time, that Katsuki was only sheltering him in exchange for section. He couldn't let his stupid alpha hormones get in the way of what Nanashir needed. He needed to provide the Omega with stability, safety, and support, and anything that went beyond that was out of the question. Katsuki thunked his head against the wall of the kitchen. He was going to need to buy Nanashir some longer shorts. Nanashir laughed and laughed when he saw the ruined remains of what was supposed to be his celebratory dinner. Katsuki had never heard him laugh so loudly before. And Katsuki sulked anyway, but Nanashi's laugh made him feel better. Just a bit. Nanashi's first dinner off his meal plan ended up being greasy takeout pizza, but he didn't seem to mind. They ate curled up on the couch together, and while Nanashir watched a documentary about the most prolific heroes that had risen since All Might's fall, a list that Katsuki was on, Katsuki watched the wonder flicker over Nanashi's face. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. When Katsuki came into his room that night, he found a stack of folded laundry on his bed, smelling of lavender and fresh cotton. Immediately, he shrugged out of his shirt and tugged on a fresh one, wanting to be drowned in Nanashi's sweet, clean scent. He collapsed into bed, simply breathing, content in the knowledge that Nanashir was safe and sound in the next room over. Katsuki groaned, covering his face with a hand. He was so royally effed. Izuku lurched awake in the dead of night, trapped in between sleep and wakefulness. He thrashed, clawing at his throat. He couldn't breathe. Why couldn't he breathe? The world came back to him slowly as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. He was wrapped in a forest green blanket that smelled of kakin, sleeping on a soft bed in one of Kakin's stolen shirts instead of tiny scraps of satin and lace. There were no shadows in the darkness, Nobody beside him or on top of him. He was alone. It was a dream, he told himself. Safe, you're safe. But the panicked haze that had settled over him refused to be dispelled so easily. His damaged, sleep-addled mind threatened to slip right back into the horrors of the past, and he couldn't force his racing heartbeat to slow. Izuku tore the blankets off, a sob catching in his throat when they caught around his legs. God damn it, he needed to get out, to get away. Away from this dark room and the shadows that loomed around him, staring into his soul. Away from the nightmares that still haunted him, playing out in sickening detail every time he closed his eyes. He stumbled to his feet, tripping over his own legs and falling onto the plush carpet with a muffled thud. Pain shot up his wrists and knees where he'd landed wrong. He in a muffled breath, half sobbing as his panic-riddled brain. Delirious as he was, the pain was the only thing he could latch onto to keep him grounded. He'd been on his hands and knees like this so many times before, skin scraping against rough stone, but it was different this time, because the ground underneath him was soft and pliant, and there were no hands on his body, forcing his legs apart. The clothes he was wearing were comfortable, baggy and soft, and when he breathed in deep, he could smell kakin on them. Bile rose in Izuku's throat. Kakin. Kakin, who probably thought he was disgusting. Who took him in out of pity. Kakin, who was glad he was dead. Katsuki, do you wish I was Izuku? No, I don't. Izuku didn't let himself show it, but those words had sent him spiraling into a dark, dangerous part of his mind, and he didn't know if he'd ever make it back. Because Katsuki didn't want him to be alive after all this time. According to the Alpha, Izuku's mother didn't want it either. And God only knew that Izuku wished he'd died years ago. I know it's horrible, but it hurts more to think that he's been alive and hurting all this time. It's easier to believe that he's really gone. I tried, Kakin, Izuku thought. I tried so many times to end it all. I stopped eating, stopped drinking. I bashed my head against the wall until I bled. I even jumped from that building, the one where they found my blood, but it's not for the reasons you think. I let myself slip away into nothingness, and I hoped so badly that nobody would ever pull me out. But Kakin had come, and Kakin had saved him. So why did Izuku still feel so empty? Izuku stumbled to his feet, leaning against the wall to keep himself upright. He didn't know where he was going, he only knew that he couldn't be here anymore. That if he had to spend another moment alone in the dark, quiet shadows, he was going to break down again. Nanisher, I know you're not Izuku, and I don't want you to be. The lights in the hall were on. Izuku didn't know, but he couldn't help but think that Kakin left them on for him so that if Izuku ever needed it, he could find his way to the light. But the fluorescents were too bold, too bright, and hurt his eyes, and where a moment ago the darkness had been overwhelming, now Izuku craved it. He didn't want to be awake anymore, didn't want to be conscious. He just wanted it to stop. Izuku found himself in the bathroom, glaring at his own reflection in the water-stained mirror. His hair was tangled and messy, his eyes red-rimmed. He wasn't quite as thin as he had been, but he was far from a healthy weight, and where Kakin's too large t-shirt hung off his shoulder, he could see the prominent bulge of his collarbones pressing against skin. His eyes were dull, cheeks hollow, and while he'd once hated how young he looked, now all he wanted was to recapture that youthful innocence. So much had happened, and now, Izuku didn't even recognize the person he saw in the mirror. He really was Nanisher. Nobody. Suddenly, the tears were welling up and spilling over, and it was all Izuku could do not to scream. He just wanted out of his body, out of this house, out of his life. He wanted the pain to go away. It was at that moment that Izuku's eyes landed on Katsuki's straight razor. Of course Kakin used a straight razor, he needed to be the best at everything, and apparently that included the best shave. But Izuku had never really paid attention to the thing until now. Had never really had a reason to. And Dr. Suzuki hadn't deemed Izuku at high enough suicide risk that she asked Kakin to hide all sharp objects in the house. The blade taunted him. It would be easy really, to end it all. A lot easier than it would be to keep on living. And after all, wasn't that what Izuku had wanted? But then he thought of blood-red eyes and a little half-smile. He thought of warm, strong arms, of the scent of burnt caramel and spice. What would it do to Kakin to find Izuku's body in the morning, bloody and pale and cold. Kaken was still haunted by the memories of Izuku's first death, still carried the weight of it on his shoulders. And as much as Izuku wanted it, he wouldn't be another scar on the Alpha's soul. But that didn't mean he had to refrain entirely. With trembling hands, Izuku grabbed the razor. He perched on the edge of the bathtub. Cutting his thighs would be best, he thought it would be easier to hide, and under no circumstances could Kaken find out about this. If he cut high enough, he might even still be able to wear shorts. With a deep breath, he held the blade above his skin. It's not like he'd never hurt himself before. He could do this. He needed this. And without letting himself think too hard, he pressed down and pulled. Flesh parted underneath the blade. For a moment, the cut was clean, and Izuku could see the shiny, whitish-pink color of severed muscle. But then blood started beading inside the cut, spilling over and down the milky white skin of his thigh. Izuku felt sick to his stomach, but the pain soothed him more than it sickened him, and he watched in morbid fascination as the blood dripped down his skin. He raised the blade. And started again. It took 6 cuts before Izuku could breathe again. Some short, some long, some shallow, some deep. The first he'd made was still the deepest, and blood was still pouring out of it, staining his skin scarlet. He reached out with shaking hands, grabbing tissues from the counter and pressing them over the ruined skin of his thighs, but it wasn't enough to stop bleeding, and when he pulled the tissue away, more blood welled up to replace what had been mopped away. Red-stained paper was plastered to his skin where the damp tissue had stuck. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Izuku should have thought ahead, should have pulled out Katsuki's med kit before using the razor. His hands shook, covered with tacky, drying blood as he reached for the medicine cabinet, smearing crimson across the mirror. Their alcohol swipes, gauze, and medical tape. Izuku grabbed what he needed, trembling so hard he almost dropped the supplies before he got a chance to use them. He tore a cleaning swab open, wrinkling his nose at the smell of antiseptic. This was going to hurt. But that pain cleared his head, made his panic subside. Pain was what he wanted, wasn't it? Gritting his teeth, Izuku dragged the alcohol swabs across his cuts, wincing at the sting. Cleaning the cuts hurt even worse than making them did, but he couldn't let them get infected. Couldn't be more of a burden on Kaken than he already was. The cuts were clean now, but the bleeding still hadn't stopped. Izuku ripped open a package of gauze, spreading it over the tops of both thighs. Then, with unsteady hands, he unrolled the medical tape, wrapping it around and around his bloody legs so that the gauze was held in place. It was messy, but it worked well enough for what he needed. After applying a second gauze pad over the deepest cut, it soaked through his makeshift bandage. After a minute or so, he took to cleaning, scrubbing the blood from the sink and mirror like he was hiding the evidence at a murder scene. The gauze wrappers and bloody tissues he flushed down the toilet. He couldn't leave them in the trash can for Kaken to find. Once it was all over, said and done, Izuku crept back down the hallway and into his room, trying not to wake the sleeping Alpha a few doors down. He shut the door behind him, but the darkness felt less oppressive now. The pain reminded him that he was here, that he was real. Izuku crawled into bed, pulling the blanket Kaken had scented closer to his face and breathing in the aroma that had always brought him so much comfort. And there, in the safety of his bedroom, Izuku let himself cry, hiccups and racking sobs shaking his tiny body as the reality of his situation set in. Kaken was trying so hard to keep him safe, so hard to protect Izuku from the world, but the only person he really needed protecting from was himself. Something was wrong. Katsuki could feel it, but he couldn't name it. It hovered at the back of his mind, just out of reach. What was that feeling that he just couldn't shake? What was Katsuki missing? He kept on wondering as he made breakfast for himself and Nanashire, just rice and eggs. Nothing too complicated, but nutritious enough that it would be good for Nanashi's still thin frame. The Omega wasn't up yet, but Katsuki wanted everything to be ready by the time he awoke. The longer Nanashire stayed with Katsuki, the more smitten he was with his new house guest. It wasn't that he'd been apathetic before, on the contrary, Nanashire had consumed his attention since the first day he'd met him. But in the past few weeks, Katsuki had gotten to see hints of the person underneath the layers of trauma that Nanashire was hidden behind. Even after all he'd been through, the Omega was soft, sweet, but there was such an understated strength to him that Katsuki couldn't ignore. Besides that, Nanashur was smart as a whip, with an intellect that could put even Katsuki's to shame. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it had the power to light up the room. If Mina had been here, she would have poked Katsuki's shoulder and teased him for being whipped, something which he would have vehemently denied. It wasn't like he had romantic feelings for Nanashur. He just liked spending time around the Omega. He liked it when Nanashur mumbled under his breath, liked it when he turned to Katsuki for comfort. And on those few occasions when he aimed his smile at Katsuki, it felt like he was staring directly at the sun. And so what if Nanashur was beautiful? Plenty of people were physically attractive. Nanashur wasn't any different. The urge that Katsuki felt to protect him and provide for him was completely platonic. And if the way Nanashur looked at him sometimes made him feel lightheaded, it was just because Katsuki was stunned that he could smile like that after everything that had happened. There was absolutely no other reason. None at all. By the time Nanashur stumbled into the living room, Katsuki's suspicions were confirmed. His eyes were underscored with bruised-looking shadows, and the corners of his mouth were turned down. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept all night. "Hey," Katsuki murmured, stepping out from behind the kitchen counter. "You okay?" "Yeah," Nanashur said, sinking down into a seat at the kitchen island. "I didn't sleep well, that's all." Katsuki walked until he was standing next to Nanashur, leaning against the granite and peering down at Nanashi's gaunt, tired face. His chest felt tight. Nanashur had been doing better these past few days, and it hurt to see it all come crumbling down again. Katsuki forced himself to relax, letting soothing pheromones leak from his pores into the air, and he saw Nanashi's shoulders relax just a bit. "You want to talk about it?" Nanashur shook his head. He still wouldn't meet Katsuki's eyes. Katsuki's inner alpha didn't like that. He frowned. "Can I touch you?" After a moment's hesitation, Nanashur nodded. Katsuki reached out, seizing Nanashur gently by the chin and turning his face up. For the first time all morning, their eyes met, and Katsuki's breath caught. Nanashur looked cold. Exhausted. It reminded him of how the Omega had looked in the hospital, curled up into himself, still clutching that scrap of bloody lace to his emaciated frame. Katsuki let out a long, shuddering breath. His arms wrapped around Nanashur before he even knew what he was doing, and he pulled the Omega to his chest. One hand came up, brushing gentle fingers through Nanashi's tangled brown hair. The other draped around Nanashi's waist, holding Nanashur to him. It felt like all conscious thought had fled Katsuki. He was driven by instinct alone as he pressed a soft, feather-light kiss against Nanashi's hair, letting his scent wrap around the Omega like a warm blanket. "You're okay," Katsuki murmured. "You're okay." For a moment, Nanashur was still, and Katsuki worried he'd crossed a line. But in the next second, the Omega's hands came up, balling in the fabric of Katsuki's shirt. It was only then that Katsuki realized Nanashur was shaking. "I won't make you talk about it," Katsuki whispered. "But when you're ready, I'm here." They stayed like that for long minutes as Katsuki held a shaking Nanashur in his arms. This moment, it was precious. There was so much darkness surrounding them, and sometimes, Katsuki could see Nanashur drowning in an ocean of his own despair. But as long as he had Katsuki, the Alpha would keep him afloat. Katsuki pulled Nanashur closer, tucking the Omega's head underneath his chin. He promised himself that he wouldn't be the first to let go. When Nanashur finally pulled away, his eyes were red. He looked miserable, but that awful, deadened look in his eyes had faded. Katsuki hated to see him in pain, but at least he wasn't shutting Katsuki out anymore. "Okay, here's what's going to happen," Katsuki said, crossing his arms over his chest. "First off, you're going to eat something." "I'm not hungry," Nanashur murmured, picking idly at a hangnail. Katsuki scowled. "Didn't ask. You're going to eat the healthy, nutritious, delicious breakfast I made, and then we're going to get all the pillows and blankets in the house and set up a nest on the couch while we watch movies. Sound good?" Nanashi's eyes flicked up to Katsuki's face, then back down again. He shrugged. Katsuki sighed inwardly. He had his work cut out for him, but he was Katsuki Fangi Bakugo. He could handle a challenge. He was going to pamper the F out of his Omega, and by the end of the day he'd have Nanashur smiling again. They were midway through their third movie, Nanashir dozing on Katsuki's lap, when the fragile peace was shattered by a knock on the door. Nanashir flinched awake, sitting bolt upright like he expected to be attacked at any moment. "Shoo, it's okay," Katsuki murmured, running his fingers through Nanashi's hair. He tried not to preen at the way Nanashir leaned into his touch. "There's just someone at the door. It's probably one of my shitty friends swinging by to say hello. If you want." Nanashir looked down at his hands, biting down on his lower lip. "Hey, be gentle," Katsuki murmured. He reached out, tugging at Nanashi's lip with his thumb. "What is it? You can tell me." Nanashi's eyes welled up with tears, but he blinked them away. "I don't want to go," he whispered, peering up at Katsuki from beneath long, green lashes. "I don't want to be alone." Katsuki's heart cracked. "Hey, that's okay." He forced a smile. "Whoever's at the door, I'll send them away, and then we can keep watching our movie, yeah?" Nanashir tore his gaze away from Katsuki's. Slowly, he nodded. Katsuki took Nanashi's hand and squeezed. It took effort to tear himself away when all he really wanted to do was pull Nanashir into his chest, but he promised himself he'd be back by the Omega's side as soon as he chased away whoever saw fit to pound on his door without so much as shooting him a text. Katsuki was already scowling when he yanked open the door only for his face to go slack with shock as soon as he saw who was waiting on the other side. "Inko!" Behind him, Nanashir whined. "Katsuki!" The older woman cooed where she stood in the doorway. Her face was red and her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced." "Hey, no." Katsuki shook his head, brows pinching together in concern. "You know my door is always open to you. Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's all right," Inko said with a watery smile. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Nanashi's scent was quickly growing sour. Katsuki didn't quite understand it. Nanashir had never reacted negatively to betas before, but he didn't have to understand it to want to protect Nanashir from whatever was causing him distress. At the same time, though, Inko Midoriya meant more to Katsuki than he could say. He couldn't send her away when she had so clearly been crying. Katsuki frowned. "I'm doing fine, Auntie. Why do you ask?" Inko's face fell. When she spoke again, her voice shook, cracking halfway through her sentence. "It's Izuku's birthday," she whispered. He would have been 23 today. Katsuki's heart plummeted. There was no way was it July already. He'd first found Nanashir in early June, and he'd been on leave ever since. Sure, Katsuki had stopped counting the days now that he was no longer working, but it couldn't be Izuku's birthday yet, could it? Breathing hard, Katsuki scrambled for his phone. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped it as he pulled it out of his pocket, peering down at the screen. There it was, the date plastered proudly across the top of the screen. Friday, June in Katsuki? Katsuki couldn't breathe. No wonder Inko was here. Every year since Izuku's death, Katsuki and Inko had gone to his grave together on his birthday and on the day he died. They brought food and flowers, cleaned his headstone until it looked brand new, lit candles and told stories about the bright-eyed boy they had lost. His chest felt too tight and he was shaking and the world was spinning because for the first time in 9 years he forgot. He'd been so caught up with taking care of Nanashir that he'd forgotten the birthday of the boy he'd failed. "I'm so sorry, Auntie," Katsuki choked. "I'm on leave for something personal, and I didn't even realize what day it was." Inko shook her head. "No, Katsuki, it's okay. Please don't cry." Katsuki hadn't even realized that he was crying until Inko pointed it out, but now that he thought about it, his face felt wet. He closed his eyes, running a shaking hand down his face. "God, I can't believe," Katsuki's voice broke, and he closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry. So sorry." Inko reached out, cupping his face in her hand. "Don't feel bad," she murmured. "You know my Izuku, he wouldn't have been upset, especially if you're taking care of something important." Important, yes. Nanashir was important. Nanashir? Nanashir was terrified. The smell hit him before anything else, the scent of fear, pure and true, almost as thick as it had been when Katsuki had found him in that reeking cesspit. Next was the small, faint whines emanating from behind him. Katsuki whirled. Nanashir was on the couch, curled up into a little ball with his green blanket wrapped around him. His face was pale, his eyes blown wide as he stared at the woman in the doorway. Hey, Nanisher, it's okay, Katsuki soothed. He held his hands up in front of his face like he was calming a wild animal. Inko is a friend. But Nanisher wasn't looking at him. Nanisher stood. For a moment, he was frozen, staring at Inko like he had seen a ghost. A broken sob cracked from behind Katsuki's back, and when he turned, Inko was looking back at Nanisher with tears in her eyes. She took a step forward, reaching out a trembling hand like she wanted to reach for him. Her mouth opened, then closed again. When she spoke, her voice was broken, so quiet that Katsuki could hardly hear. Izuku. Just like that, the moment turned to glass and shattered. Without a word, Nanisher darted into the back room, door slamming shut behind him. Inko made to run after him. The only thing that kept her from running after Nanisher was the arm Katsuki wrapped around her waist. Izuku! Inko screamed, clawing mindlessly at Katsuki's forearm. Let me go! Katsuki pulled her back toward the door. He couldn't let her run after Nanisher, convinced that he was her long-lost son, especially after the day Nanisher had had. Auntie, stop. Inko was smaller than Katsuki, but she still fought like a wildcat against his hold. Katsuki, that's my son. That's my son. It's not him, Katsuki begged. Auntie, please stop, you're scaring him. Inko shook her head wildly. I know my son Katsuki, she cried. That's Izuku. I know it is. It's not. Katsuki prayed to whatever god might be listening for Inko to believe him. He couldn't let this shitshow get any worse than it already was. He's an Omega from the OT, we found him a few weeks ago. I'm helping him get back on his feet. Inko sobbed. But his eyes. And Katsuki's heart crumbled in his chest. Because he knew exactly what Inko was going through. He'd thought the same thing all those weeks ago when he'd first found Nanisher, and it had nearly destroyed him. I know. But he's been through a lot, Annie. I don't want to scare him. Inko sagged in Katsuki's arms. It was like all the fight simply drained out of her. She collapsed, limp and sobbing in his arms. Katsuki raised his knuckles, rapping hesitantly against Nanashi's door. Inko had left several minutes ago, apologizing profusely to Katsuki for her outburst and crying the entire time. She told him to pass her apologies on to Nanisher, that she'd just been so emotional that something inside her had snapped. She was going to visit Izuku's grave and then head home to get some sleep. Katsuki had already changed his clothes so that Inko's scent wouldn't linger on him. He didn't know what it was about the beta woman, but something had set Nanisher off, and Katsuki wasn't taking any chances. Nanisher? Katsuki called, leaning his forehead against the door. Can I come in? Katsuki could hear something shuffling around inside. When the door cracked open, Nanisher was peering up at him through the gap, emerald eyes swimming with tears as he bit down hard on his lower lip. Katsuki let out a breath. I'm sorry, she didn't mean to scare you. I should have sent her away like I said I would. He ran a tired hand down his face. God, this had been a long fing day, and all Katsuki really wanted was to curl up on the couch again with Nanisher tucked into his side. I was worried, she's an old friend and she looked upset, but I promised you I would come right back, and I didn't honor that. I'm sorry. When Nanisher spoke, his voice was so quiet that Katsuki hardly heard him. Is she okay? Katsuki blinked. What? That woman, Nanisher said, staring down at his feet. She's okay? Katsuki's smile was strained. Yeah. She's fine now. Nanashi's face cracked. It looked like he was about to burst into tears. That boy you told me about. Your friend. Izuku. Nanashi's shoulders curled in on themselves. That was his mother, yeah, Katsuki said, running a hand over his face. I'm sorry, you really do look like him, Nanisher, and it's his birthday, and when she saw you, I think it just sent her over the edge. He shook his head. It won't happen again. If she needs me, I'll meet her somewhere, but she won't be coming back over while you're here. For some reason, that just made Nanisher look more upset. He bit down harder on his lower lip. Hey gentle, remember? Katsuki murmured, bringing his hand up to brush his thumb down Nanashi's cheek. It's your friend's birthday? Nanisher choked. Nanisher, we don't have to talk about Izuku if you don't want to, Katsuki said, bringing his other hand up to cup Nanashi's face. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Nanisher wrapped his shaking arms around himself. Katsuki, his voice broke and he closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. I don't know what to do. You don't have to do anything. Hey, come here. Katsuki pulled Nansher closer, wrapping his arms around the smaller man and holding him tight to his chest. He crooned softly. What's got you all worked up? Nanashi's hands balled up into fists in the front of Nanashi's t-shirt. I don't want to hurt anybody. Oh, Nanisher, no. Katsuki shook his head, pulling Nanisher closer. Me and Inko are still grieving, but our pain is our own. It has nothing to do with you. But what if it does? Nanisher sobbed. Katsuki pulled back just enough to look Nanisher in the eye. Just because you look like the boy we lost doesn't mean you have to carry our burdens, he whispered. It's my job to protect you, Nanisher, please, don't waste your energy worrying about me. God, now that Katsuki looked closer, Nanisher really did look like Izuku. He'd gained a bit of weight, not nearly enough, but his cheeks looked less sunken nonetheless, and even after just a few weeks of regular sunshine, his freckles were popping up all over the place. Not to mention his eyes so wide, so green, nearly a mirror image of Izuku's. Staring down at Nanashi's face, emerald eyes wide as tears tracked down his cheeks, Katsuki was hit by déjà vu so strong it left him reeling. But Katsuki wouldn't let himself focus on that. Nanisher deserved better than to be constantly compared to a boy he'd never even met. Do you want to finish our movie? Katsuki asked instead. Nanisher nodded against his chest, clinging so tightly to him that Katsuki didn't think he'd ever be able to pry him free. Didn't think he'd ever want to. But even when they settled back onto the couch, even when Nanisher was once again pressed against Katsuki's side, the haunted look in his eyes never faded. He didn't say a word for the rest of the night.